Hello and welcome to another amazing part of What If Eren Was Ghidorah? Ekamikami64 wrote this amazing story. Please support them. Don't forget to like, sub, and leave a comment. Now let's dive in. What do you mean, what is a monkey? Grice asked in legitimate surprise, looking around the humans in bewilderment, a mood matched by Boric and Ellie. Something we don't have on this island, obviously, Jean answered in annoyance. Are they very common in the outside world? Hang asked curiously. Grice paused before shaking his head. No, it's just one of those creatures everyone normally knows about. Monkeys and apes are believed to be related to humans in some way, or that was a theory I heard being discussed back in my day. Monkeys? Really? They think we're related to the hairy tree folks. Emer asked incredulously. Why does she know about them? Ellie asked curiously as she looked to the other giants among her, along with their one translator. Speaking of which, Emer was turned into a pure titan about, how long ago again? Historia asked, looking to Emer for answers. About 60 when I got out. 65 now, Emer answered dismissively. Wow, sheesh, was born close to the fall of the Empire, Boris realized in surprise. I'm almost afraid to ask if Marley was more or less horrible back then to our people. We're getting off topic, Commander Erwin spoke up. We can discuss what a monkey, or ape, is in time. Please describe this beast titan as best you can. It was Eren's middle head that spoke up this time to Historia. Hairy, very long arms, sharp teeth, Historia conveyed. He says he can throw rocks hard enough to kill people and with good aim. Titans even if he got the right shot. And both it and this very small cart titan could speak? Hang asked in interest. Grice nodded. We couldn't make out what they were saying, but Ellie and I heard them talking while I was dragging her up the wall. Please don't remind me, Ellie whined softly. A giant who is afraid of heights. How does she even stand up? Connie asked with a chuckle. Boris turned and glared at Connie for the jab, making the young soldier flinch. I'm pretty sure her fear of heights is relative to her own size, Armin reasoned with a diplomatic smile. It's not as if someone like that would be scared every time they look down at their feet. So, why did you idiots think attacking them without backup was a good idea? Levi asked bluntly. Einz glared at Levi and his reminder of their failed raid. Dre gave the other head a scolding look, for he deemed it far from a failure. I regret nothing about that, Grice said firmly. We found another of my comrades doing so and we learned what the Beast Titan can do. Yeah, about that, what the fuck? Emer spoke up, turning people into titans with a roar. Look, I heard some fantastical stories about what the Nine can do, but that sounds like something reserved for the founder. How is this hairy bastard pulling it off? That is a good question, Erwin remarked. Grice, do you and your companions know anything that might explain this? I might, kind of, Boris spoke up with a troubled look. It has been well over a decade since we were brought here. Perhaps Marley has discovered something new through their own research into the Titans. Marley has their own Hangs? The world doesn't need more than one. Multiple Hangs. Terrifying. Hang blinked. Why is Eren looking at me like that? Historia paused. Basically, Boris thinks Marley might have invented something new to do this since they researched Titans like Section Commander Hang. That still doesn't explain why Eren is looking at me like that, Hang countered. Yes, it does, Mikasa countered without hesitation. Hang huffed, crossing her arms. There is an upside to this, Grice said. They still need Eldians to turn. And I don't think he can just shout and use it on any Eldians, or control just any Titan. Based on. Hang challenged intellectually. Common sense. He could have come alone and rallied every Titan he could, or just gotten within the walls on his own to turn everyone into his minions. He hasn't done either, Grice reasoned. Sound reasoning, Erwin agreed. A power like that could easily wipe them all out if there weren't some limits to it. So, you believe they cannot use such a tactic again without another factor, be it an unknown resource or a fresh supply of prepared Eldians to use as fodder? There's one thing I don't get? Sasha spoke up looking at Ellie. You all said she was with these tusk dogs or whatever she is, the ones who are, wild or whatever we're calling it. How come they didn't turn on her? Ellie growled and barked her answer. Oh, that's kind of nice actually, Historia said in surprise before translating. Those creatures are pack animals. Even in that state of mind, they're not going to turn on a pack member without good reason. Interesting. So each creature has its own primal mindset, Armin mused. Eren silently listened on. He and the others had agreed not to mention to the humans that these forms came with literal personalities, that these were the bodies of creatures from some long-forgotten era that they were somehow taking on. Mainly because it didn't change anything, extra personality or pure instinct, it boiled down to the same fact that all of them could go rabid under certain circumstances. That, and they were fairly sure they would all sound insane to some degree. Still, they could unravel the finer details later. This does confirm that Marley has no intention of abandoning its mission against the people of the walls, Erwin remarked, pointing out the biggest point to take away from this. They might get more ballsy now that they made you all run for it, Levi pointed out, shrugging at some offended look thrown his way. People tend to act more stupid if they think they have the advantage. Levi had a point, Eren conceded. So do we take the fight to them again or do we wait for them to make a move? Erwin seemed to almost expect the question when Historia gave it to him. By what you've all told me, they believe we will come to them. If we wait for them to make a move, it will give us more time to prepare. But that in turn gives them the same, and they might have reinforcements coming from off the island, Hang remarked grimly. Grice, how many more of your comrades do you think you can find and rally? Erwin asked the crawler. Grice hissed in thought. Not many. There were about 4 dozen of us in total. 10 I know didn't even make it to the island, killed in the interrogations. Nearly half of the rest went rabid, and those killed a few more of us that weren't. I think there might be 10 of us left at this point, maybe 15? Ellie's head drooped and her ears folded down at that. Boris wrapped a wing around her in comfort. My wing will be healed in a few days. I can fly out and search for some of the others. Historia dutifully translated for everyone. Still trying to understand what something like this would look like flying, Jean remarked. Erwin nodded. We will need to prioritize them. While having them as allies would be ideal, we need to know how many are rabid and might try to attack the people within the walls. Eren stiffened. He hadn't really thought about that. If a group of crawlers scaled the wall, it would be a massacre. We shouldn't have to worry about that for a while, Grice assured. Eating titans soothes even the rabid ones. Even if they bypass the dogs and the Marleyans, they'll have plenty of titans to feast on for a while. So the titans are good for something, Connie remarked idly. Erwin considered all the information carefully. I appreciate the initiative you all took in this, and the caution you used to pull out before you were caught in a trap you weren't sure you would survive. However, the next time the enemy is engaged, I don't plan for it to be just you 4 alone. Understood. On instinct, all parties nodded. Very well, I shall leave you to recuperate and for our new members to adjust, Erwin said as he turned to leave. God damn, that man is intense and strangely inspiring. We could have used someone like him back in Marley, Boris mused. Trust me, I've had the same thought at one point, Grice admitted before turning to the others. I'm going to catch up with Boris and Ellie. I'm not translating a damn thing, so if anyone wants to listen to a third of a conversation, you're free to come along. Sure, why not? Connie said with a grin. I'm sure whatever I imagine will be funnier in my head. I'm coming too. After I grab my sketchbook. Hang agreed with a wide grin as she took off. Be back soon, lovelies. Just don't let her near your asshole. Boris and Ellie looked at Eren in shock. Historia couldn't help snickering to herself. Let me guess, Eren brought up the thing about Hang poking his? Armin trailed off awkwardly. Yes, he is, and yes, you too, he is serious. Always be wary of that giant fetishist. Grice warned Ellie and Boris. Oh, so when you said giant fetishist, you didn't mean she was incredibly degenerate, you meant she had a fetish for giants. Like us, Ellie realized in discomfort. Is it that kind of fetish or? Boris asked, hoping that wasn't the case. The jury is still out on that, Grice remarked evenly, Eren's 3 heads all nodding in serious agreement. Yep, it's a lot funnier in my head, Connie said, nodding to himself with a smile. Historia covered her face. I'm not so sure about that, Connie. Meanwhile, Rico Brzezinska frowned as she studied the blond man across from her. She wasn't sure why it had fallen to her to read this man into the situation, but it had all the same. So let me get this straight, he said with a gruff voice, stroking his chin. The rumors about our golden friend being like the Titan shifters are true? And he's Eren Yeager? There was a distinctly hopeful tone to his voice. That is the case, Captain. We originally were keeping the situation under wraps, but we know there are rumors of his identity circling. I heard, but, I just thought it was wishful thinking to believe it, he said with a short laugh, smiling softly as he looked off to the side. That brat really is alive then. Thank God. We're aware you have a history with him and his friends, Armin Artlert and Mikasa Ackerman? Rico continued on. Yeah, that's right. I was stationed at Shiganshina before things went to hell. Watched those brats grow up and everything, he said with a sigh as he crossed his arms. Still, that explains why this reason walk was formed out of his classmates. I'll get to the point, Captain Hannes, Rico said bluntly. Obviously people have trouble taking soldiers so young seriously. For good reason in some cases. Commander Erwin wanted to place an older soldier as the public face of the reason walk. You want me to be the spokesman for a group watching over two friendly monsters? Hannes asked, skeptical but amused by the concept. 4 of them now, Rico answered. All we're basically asking you to do is help keep things calm and running smoothly. None of those children are exactly ready for a leadership position. And it would prove beneficial to have this position filled by someone Jaeger and the others trust. Hannes sighed. I'm not fully confident in my people skills, but I should be able to manage. Besides, you're right. Better me than someone Eren might really butt heads with. Rico nodded. I believe the commanders are already having your transfer put in motion. I guess I didn't have much choice in the end, eh? Hannes remarked, unbothered by that in this exact situation. Fine. So, which of the heads should I stare at when I talk to him? It was a strange yet valid question, Rico admitted. I would keep an eye on the head to his right. That one tends to be the more aggressive of the 3 from what I have seen and heard. Aggressive sums up Eren most of the time, Hannes said with a chuckle before turning grim. Be straight with me. Have there been any problems with him? None I am privy to. He takes care not to be reckless around people, given his size, Rico explained. There was an incident where someone shot a cannonball at him in crazed paranoia, but he has long since recovered from that. Recovered from a cannonball? Hannes repeated, shaking his head. Anything else I should know? Section Commander Hang will be filling you in, I believe, when she introduces you to the reason walk and to the 4 giants. I will advise you that only one of the giants can speak though. Yeah, I've heard that guy a few times. Kind of off-putting, like it's almost human but not, Hannes remarked. Rico nodded in silent agreement with that. Follow me please. Right on your tail, Hannes said as he followed the much shorter soldier. Having been speaking just outside of Trost, it didn't take them long to enter Trost. Hannes had been through Trost a few times since the breach was sealed and the Titans killed by Eren no less. The thought almost made him smile. In hindsight, that wrathful personality towards Titans really did fit Eren. So, they just roam around this city like a pin? Hannes asked as he looked at all the minor and major damage to various houses. Jaeger can't enter further into Wall Rose as a matter of fact, so there is little else for them to do or go, Rico reasoned. Here, they don't have to worry about people being nearby too often. Hannes didn't disagree with that, but he was surprised Eren didn't get stir-crazy, being stuck inside Trost for so often. They both stopped as something came from around the corner, down the street. Hannes tensed as he looked upon what he could only describe as an enormous snake, large enough to swallow cattle and people whole without effort. It slithered forward, raising up its head to look at them. Some kind of skin unfurled around its head, almost like a frown or something as it stared at them. Don't worry, they don't mean any harm, Rico remarked, passing as something snapped near the serpent, which looked towards its tail end in surprise. But watch out when you get close, obviously. Right? Hannes said, swallowing thickly. Boris, stop scaring them. You're a giant damn snake that's going to freak some people out. Hannes looked up in alarm as another creature climbed on top of a nearby building. He didn't have a comparison for this one with its 2 legs and long tail, the head that looked like a reptilian skull. Hello, Grice, Rico greeted neutrally. Do I know you? Grice asked curiously. Not well, obviously, Rico said with a sigh. I'm Rico Brzezinska? Rico? Ah, right, the one in charge of the garrison here when Pixis isn't around, Grice realized. Hannes blinked. It was kind of surreal, but the more this Grice talked, the less it bothered Hannes that he was talking to a giant monster. There was a loud, canine-like whimpering in the background. We're just talking, Ellie, no one is looking at you. Grice called over his shoulder. Hannes blinked. Is someone taking a monster shit over there? Monster piss actually, Grice remarked, giving Hannes a once-over. I know I haven't met yet. Sorry, I guess I'm joining the Giant Watchers. Name is Hannes, he introduced. Hannes? Grice repeated curiously. Wait, are you that former drunk Eren told me so much about? Hannes deeply wished that he could still put Eren in a headlock in that very instance. End of chapter. Everyone is back and reporting what happened, while also welcoming their newest members. Hannes is being brought into the fold to act as the adult of the group. And of course, every kaiju is warned about letting hang near their anus. Yeah, she's never living that down. Not a whole lot else this chapter, Other than our info about how many of Grissy's comrades are out there in Sinesh, about a dozen is the ballpark, maybe less. So far we have a crawler, a wart dog, a warbat, a mini Dora. Okay, just as a reminder, Eren isn't just small, he has no wings yet. He's slowly getting the full power and size of Ghidorah. There is an in-story reason for this. Still near the sealed breach, Eren caught sight of the pair before they got close. Rico was no surprise by now, but Hannes? Eren's three heads turned to scrutinize the older man, catching the attention of his friends. Hannes? Armin said in surprise. Who's that? Jean asked curiously. Someone we knew in Shiganshina. He helped Eren and I, Mikasa remarked. Her voice was warmer at seeing a reminder of those younger and simpler times. Hannes, however, kept his eyes an easy smile on the three golden heads studying him. He knows it's me. Historia tilted her head at that but decided not to translate. Mikasa, Armin, glad to see you're both in one piece, Hannes greeted as he stopped before the group, looking up at Eren. Looks like you got in over your head as usual, kid? Dre let out a reptilian laugh at that while Ainz rolled his eyes and Zwei just studied Hannes curiously. And look at that, I can't even decide what to do anymore. You all must have your hands full more than ever with this lughead, Hannes teased the others. All three of Eren's heads looked annoyed by that to varying degrees, getting a laugh from Hannes. Rico cleared her throat to grab their attention. Commander Erwin has decided it's time to appoint a more senior officer as something of an official spokesperson for the Reason Walk. Spokesperson? Not leader? Marco asked curiously. While he is to be the official soldier in charge, Captain Hannes' duty is primarily to smooth over and mitigate any issues between you all with the public or military. I guess that makes sense, Jean said with a sigh. We're all a bunch of rookies just out of training. The only reason we're a part of this group was to control how many people knew everything. It'd be hard for most people to take any of us seriously if you made one of us the leader. Exactly, Rico agreed. Private Arlert? Do you think you can get him up to speed on anything he might not know? Armin nodded. I can do that, ma'am. Then I'll leave you all to get situated, Rico said as she turned to leave. Eren began to growl loudly. Eren says it is good to see you, Sorry, Captain Hannes, Historia said with a smile. I'm Historia. So, you're the one who speaks for the hothead, Hannes said with a chuckle. How does that work anyway? Honestly, I don't notice any difference. He just sounds normal to me, Historia explained with an uncertain shrug. I meant more Wayo. If anyone, I would have expected Mikasa for that, Hannes said, the Ackerman girl not reacting to the joke. She fell and the crazy bastard caught her in his mouth, Jean explained flatly. Historia sighed with a small blush of embarrassment while Hannes looked up at Eren with a scolding look. Eren, don't you know better? You need to at least take a girl on a date before anything like that, Hannes teased. Eren rolled all six eyes, Ainz glancing at his tails in consideration. Eren, you can't tail flick him, Mikasa pointed out calmly. He'll die. Ah, so she can understand him, Hannes said, nodding as if that made everything right in the world somehow. We can guess what he's saying sometimes, Armin corrected with a half-hearted chuckle. Armin, you can do it because you're a smart guy. Mikasa can do it because she's Mikasa, Hannes said matter-of-factly. Mikasa made no effort to refute that claim. Eren croaked out something as he turned to leave. Eren's heading off to see how the others are doing. He said he'll send Connie and Sasha this way if he sees them, Historia explained dutifully. I see Eren has interesting friends in these interesting times, Hannes said with a headshake, frowning as he looked at Armin. I heard about the Titan Shifter too. Eren can't change back. Armin frowned. It's complicated. It involves Eren's father. Grisha? What's he got to do with all of this? Hannes asked curiously. Everything in a way, Mikasa answered bluntly. Elsewhere, Eren walked towards his fellow giants. Well, this is one hell of a sample size. Hank's voice was followed by awkward whining noises from Ellie while Grice groaned. Woman, do you have to make this weirder than it already is? Eren walked up to the scene and was morbidly fascinated by not only how unsurprising the scene was, but how he needed no explanation. The crawler and warthog were sitting around a crater filled with a distinctly yellow liquid, Hang holding a test tube filled with a sample of it. Thankfully, Hang was wearing gloves which somehow made it less weird, at least to Dre. And there's our handsome golden friend. Hang greeted with a grin as she sealed the tube. Don't mind me, just collecting some research samples from our new friend. Congrats, that's almost an initiation at this point. Ellie tried to look amused, but it was clear she was still adjusting to the situation, watching as Hang left while whistling a tune. Eren, can we make it a rule that none of us should be alone with that woman? Grice asked. She's harmless but has no concept of personal space. Where's Boris? He said something about finding a place to nap. So he's probably lying around somewhere, Ellie answered, looking around at the city of Trost. So, we just stay in here until they have need of us? I'll let you explain that one, Grice said, mindful of the fact that everyone could understand him. They couldn't stop us if we tried to do something. Ellie blinked skeptically at that, trying not to be too noticeable as she glanced up at the cannons. Those cannons only daze me. But they're not that accurate or easy to reload. If I wanted out, they couldn't really stop me. But we've made it a point to prove we're on their side. We're all working together and following the military's lead. With some initiative on our part, Grice chuckled. Don't worry, they're not like Marley. Some of them are scared shit of us, but they're not going to treat you like an actual dog or anything. Duh. Heinz winced as something flashed in his mind. The corpse of a child ripped apart by dogs, left on a riverside. A feeling of rage, hate, sorrow, powerlessness. It felt just like when he lost his mother. When I vowed to kill them all. Hey, you okay, Jaeger? Grice's voice called, punctuated by a rather too hard slap to the back. Eren turned sharply to look at Grice. The crawler was making every effort to look calm as he regarded Eren with concern while Ellie was. The wart dog was shivering in place, eyes trembling and downcast in fear. Sorry about that. Lost in thought. Grice nodded slowly. Is yours trying to take over? Ellie asked in concern. I don't know. Eren frowned at his own admittance. Was the voice of the storm trying to take over? It didn't feel like he was being taken over so much as losing control. Was that the same thing in this situation? So what was the trigger, the cause? Eren hated just how little he knew about this thing he was sharing a body with. He couldn't even pin down a motive. The other beasts were scared of the storm. That much was obvious. Eren wasn't surprised. From what little he gleaned from the ancient memories, the storm hadn't had many rivals or threats. But the storm hated the Titans. What? Those hadn't been around in those ancient memories, surely? If not, what possible connection could the storm and the Titans have? Merely thinking about that was enough to get the storm's attention and ire, it seemed. Still, there was its reaction to the beast Titan. Eren could swear he almost saw something else standing in place of that shifter, something similarly hairy but different in build, something that clearly had the ire of the originator of this form. Always more questions, it seems. Meanwhile, 2 more of them. I'm not sure we'll have enough room in this city if we get too many more, Gunther remarked as the Levi squad stood on top of the wall, observing their giant allies below. Even if they don't get any bigger, that'd still be true, ELD agreed grimly. Bigger? What, you think those big bastards are going to start growing? Olu asked coolly. You don't pay attention to what Section Commander Hang says, do you? Petra asked knowingly. I tend to tune 4 eyes out from time to time, yeah, Olu answered. If it's not on a mission, it's usually just one of her rambling theories. This isn't a theory. She says Eren has gotten bigger over time somehow, Petra said with a frown. That is still so weird to think about. It's one thing that the others are all people from the outside world, but that golden bastard was a new cadet. Gunther said with a head shake. I'm still stuck on humanity beyond the walls, and they hate us because apparently the Titans are our people? Gildi said with a sigh, rubbing the back of his head. It was a lot simpler before all this. The world often looks simpler with a blindfold. The group of 4 turned sharply and saluted. Commander Erwin. Captain Levi. Petra greeted. At ease, Erwin waved off. There is a situation. Please tell me there wasn't another breach, Petra said warily. Nothing that bad yet, Levi said, glancing at Erwin who gave him a nod to continue. We're heading to Kralva district. Kralva? What's up there, sir? Petra asked in confusion. There's been sightings of something up there. Some big that flies, Levi informed pointedly, glancing down to Boris the warbat, sleeping between buildings. We think it's another snake like him. Trouble is, we don't know if this one is still sane or not. How do we figure that out? Are we taking the Reese girl with us? PLD asked uncertainty. Erwin shook his head. Grice is going with you. Huh? Olu asked in shock, summarizing the entire Levi squad's thoughts. That bony asshole is the only one of them that can talk and he can climb over the walls without damaging it, Levi reminded. He's going to see if this one is on our side. If not, we're going to help him bring it down. Sir, not that we're not used to the odds being against us, but can we even hurt something like them? Gunther asked uncertainly. You can. Eren himself seems to be the most durable of any creature, and the only one we know to be unique among Grice and his comrades. While more dangerous in many ways, the giants by and large can be wounded by our weaponry, Erwin assured. All you need to remember is to not treat it like a titan. They can regenerate to some extent, but they will die to sustained and grievous injuries. That was somewhat reassuring for them all. Get your horses and supplies ready. We leave as soon as we get Grice up to speed and over the wall, Levi informed pointedly. Sir, they all saluted before heading off. What do you think the odds of this one being friendly too? Levi asked as he watched his team leave. Regardless of its state of mind, I'm more concerned with why it is near Kralva at all, Erwin remarked. Levi hummed and glanced to the northwest. If this one has gone wild, it's looking for something. Food, a place to nest? Not a lot of options bode well for the people around. But if they are still aware and sane. Just what drove them out of hiding? Erwin summarized. Be careful, Levi. Not like you to say that, Levi noted. Something bothering you? If we round up all of Grice's allies that are still of their own minds and deal with the rest, the Titans would pose little threat to us. The same could be true for Marley and the outside world, Erwin looking to the south with a narrowed gaze. It is too idealistic to think that such good fortune comes without a cost or threat. Levi hummed and nodded as he left. He agreed. These giants made for great allies. But there was bound to be a catch. Especially with how good everything else had been going. The real monarch coming out of the shadows and on their side, a Titan shifter ally and these giants? The other shoe was bound to drop sooner or later. Grice had taken to the plan well enough and soon climbed over the top of the wall. This is still one hell of a view, I have to admit, he said to himself, pausing to gaze upon the distant horizon from atop these great walls. Moments like this, he almost forgot there were giant titans inside the walls. Just remember the plan, Gunther said. Follow along the outside of the wall until you see the smoke signal from us. Scale over then or if you're attacked by something. I heard the first time, Grice said with a head shake as he scaled down the exterior of Wall Rose. With that done, Gunther used his gear to descend down near the wall, landing on his horse with the rest of the team waiting for him. He's on the move, Gunther said. Then so are we, Levi said as their horses took off with a snap of the reins. Captain Levi, was there anything else about the sightings we should know about? Petra called over the horses. Not especially. The commanders thought it might just be a hoax, people paranoid with all the talks about other giant monsters, Levi said evenly. Then Eren brought back that stray serpent. When we heard he could fly, well, suddenly this became a bigger concern. Well, if it's just sightings, that means it's not attacking people, right? ELD pointed out. Unless it wiped a place out, Gunther said grimly. There are a lot of small villages around here. It'd be easy for something like that to feast on a place and leave no survivors. Especially if it was something like Grice, Olu said, glancing at the wall. Captain, I kind of don't like the idea of letting Grice out of our sight. What, you worried he'll go feral any moment? Petra asked with a frown. Not that, no, Olu answered. You're worried we'll run into a crawler that's wild and mistake it for Grice, if only for an instance, Levi predicted. The Levi squad shared a look at that unsettling prospect. Maybe we should paint a sign on Grice or something like that, ELD suggested, and he wasn't entirely joking. Grice, meanwhile, was racing around the wall. He would prefer to be running along the inside so he and the others didn't lose track of each other. After all, he had no idea how fast these horses went. He hadn't had a lot of experiences with the animals even before all of this, let alone trying to guess how fast he could run himself. But he got the reasons why. Not only did it make it easier for him to grab a Titan to snack on, but it also allowed them to keep an eye out for anything outside the wall. And, being utterly practical, Grice was fully aware that something like himself running around the inside was just asking for a lot of panicking people and all the problems that could cause. Still, one of the flyers so many miles north? Most of them were in the south, within and outside of Wall Maria. Just who had wandered that far up north? Even if they had been taken over by their inner beast, that just made it more confusing. What would draw any of the beasts up to here? He shook his head. No use dwelling on it, he'd find out when they got there in a few days. He just hoped nothing happened back in Trost while he was gone. End of chapter. Well, while things are settling again with Hannes, Grice has left with Levi and his squad to investigate sightings of what might be more warbats like Boris. Eren obviously couldn't come along due to, well, there's no way for him to get into the other city and Eren doesn't have wings yet. How do your horses run that fast? Levi wasn't sure what he expected to hear from Grice on the first night they stopped to camp and rest the horses. That certainly wasn't it. They've been bred and trained to run faster and longer. It's the only way we've been able to outmaneuver the titans out in the open, Levi remarked thoughtfully. Train my tail. I've seen horses racing, these things are going at least twice as fast as they should be, Grice said with a head shake. Look at me, a giant monster on parody, and I'm freaking out over something like the horses being faster. Yeah, that is a bit much, Levi agreed evenly as he hung from the wall on the outside. Grice gave him an annoyed look for his remark. Any sign of anything out here? Nothing so far. I ate a few titans while I read. I thought I was ahead of you for so long I thought I could stop and eat. Turns out, I need to gobble them down as I go, Grice remarked. Gross, Levi said without missing a beat. Give a shout if anything happens before sunrise. Same to you for whatever that's worth, Grice nodded back before Levi ascended Wall Rose to return to his team. After that, the first couple days went smoothly until Levi. The Levi team pulled their horses to a skidding stop, looking back to see Grice on top of Wall Rose. Get your asses back here. I have something. That idiot is going to give everyone a heart attack doing that, Olu said with a cowl, wondering how many villages and towns saw and heard that. He probably has a good reason, Ildi said, and that thought made him visibly concerned as Grice went back to the outer side of Rose. Gunther, Petra, you're both with me. You two watch the horses, Levi said as they got off their mounts, using the nearby trees as points to launch off, bringing them to the wall. They crested over the top, landing on the edge of the other side to look down. Grice wasn't fighting anything, but there were clearly titans around him. Titans that weren't moving and weren't disappearing. That's not ominous at all, Gunther said sarcastically as studied the scene in concern. Be careful you two, Levi said as they scaled down the wall with their gear. Grice, what is it? Look for yourselves, Grice said, gesturing to the titans. Levi wasn't sure what he was looking at. The titans were immobile with large parts of their bodies missing. The troubling thing wasn't just that they weren't regenerating or evaporating, but their wounds appeared to be scorched, as if something had burned away the giant foes. I found them like this, Grice informed, placing a foot on one of the titans. Gunther and Petra instantly drew their blades as the titans twitched but couldn't get up or even try to attack them, Levi narrowing his eyes. They're still alive. Yeah, Grice said with a growling hum of thought. I think they're in pain too. What? I thought titans couldn't feel pain from their titan forms. Petra asked in confusion. Isn't that what that Emer girl told us? Yeah, that's what concerns me, Grice said with an uncomfortable tone. If they're feeling pain, that means the human they once were is also in pain. The human trio looked at the bodies again, only now realizing that the faces were contorted in pain. They were so used to the strange expressions of titan faces, they hadn't paid them any mind. But each of these looked almost like they were. Are they crying? Petra asked slowly. No way, Gunther said, more in surprise than denial as he saw the liquid coming from the eyes of a titan. I didn't know they could do that. Levi stared at the creature. Some might feel vindictive pleasure at seeing a creature like the titan suffering. But knowing it was just a person forcibly trapped in an unending hell of being a mindless titan, most would be hard-pressed to take delight with that context in their mind. I'm going to put them out of their misery if that's fine with you, Grice said awkwardly. Wait a minute, Levi said. Look them over first so if they have anything else to show for it. Claw marks, bite marks, something to tell us what got them. Grice nodded and rolled the bodies around awkwardly. One lurched to him. He hissed as the titan bit his arm, drawing blood but doing little more than that. With a snap of his jaws, he ripped the nape out and ate the flesh before it vanished. Don't suppose any of you saw anything worth mentioning? Grice grunted as he moved to kill and eat the rest of them. Just the obvious, Levi mused. The only thing I've known to cause titans to feel pain is the golden brat. Grice looked away and thought. Could Grisha do that too? It's hard to recall, but I remember titans dying more easily against him, he said, trying to remember events hazed by hunger and primal madness. What's so special about that golden dragon form then? Gunther asked. Grice looked to the side and chose his words carefully. I don't know. Just that, when I get close to going feral from the hunger, I start to get scared of it too. It, Levi noted. Not him? Grice nodded. I don't think it's Eren himself that triggers it as, whatever his form is or what it represents. The others that went feral avoided Grisha a lot. Not entirely, but it was like they thought he was more dangerous than the rest of us. Well, objectively he is, Petra remarked. Trust me, it takes a lot to scare a starving creature more than dying from an empty stomach, Levi said in a dark, knowing voice. Grice, let us know if you find more like this. I don't care how much it slows us down. If it's just more of this, we'll continue on, but if it's something different. Got it? Grice said, looking to the skies. Keep an eye out yourselves, okay? If this is connected to wherever we're going, then that means it can fly. And it was a cloudy day, Levi noted to himself. Not raining, but if something could soar above those gray clouds, no one would see it. The only saving grace in Levi's mind was that whatever struck here, if it could fly, it only went after the Titans. That was a good sign, hopefully. Meanwhile, okay, it's official. He is definitely getting bigger. No one argued with Sasha's observation as Eren stalked around the area near the boulder, the biggest open space in Trost. The golden dragon had stared at the boulder strangely before walking over it. She's right. We're definitely bigger. Svi. Getting outside might be hard if this keeps up. Maybe we can dig the bottom deeper? Dre. Really? Svi. With what hands? Dre glared as Ainz and Svi gave him annoyed looks. What do you think he's talking about? Connie asked curiously. Probably something about killing Titans. You know how Eren is, Sasha remarked with a shrug to Connie. All three heads looked at her in annoyance. I want to be annoyed. Eren. Still, why is he getting bigger? Sasha mused out loud as they watched Eren stalk away from the boulder. Maybe he's still growing up? Connie mused. Didn't we hear that Eren's old man only had 2 heads? Maybe he's still growing into it. You think Eren's dad only had 1 head once? Maybe even 1 tail? Sasha wondered out loud. You know, I keep forgetting that he has 2 tails, Connie admitted, looking at said appendages. How do you forget that he has 2 giant spiky clubs he swings around? Sasha asked skeptically. Look, they move in sync so much, I almost feel like I'm just looking at one tail while cross-eyed or something to see double, Connie defended with his arms crossed. The 3 heads tilted their heads. Their tails moved in sync subconsciously? They didn't know that. Then again, they didn't think too much about their tails when not using them for something. Hey Eren? Sasha spoke up, getting his attention. What's going to be your first meal when you're human again? What? Svi. Why are you even surprised? Dre. Where did that come from? Connie asked in bewilderment. Well, we know that Eren's dad turned back, so that means Eren can too, Sasha reasoned with a smile. And I can't help thinking, what would be the first meal I'd want after all that time in that form? Yes, but why is she asking? Svi. They can't even understand us. Wait for it. Dre. Why are you asking though? Christe, Historia isn't here to translate, and we're not Armin or Mikasa who can just guess what this guy is thinking half the time, Connie pointed out, giving Sasha a look that questioned her intelligence. Yeah, but we can practice. Sasha recommended brightly. Eren can come up with an answer and we can try to figure it out. Eren. I hate this idea. Seconded. Svi. Yeah, this isn't going to work with these 2. Dre. Well, not like we have anything better to do, Connie decided. Eren contemplated walking away and wasn't sure why he didn't. Is it meat? Sasha called out. Eren shook his head. What? Sasha cried out in outrage. Sasha, the guy is biting through Titans all the time. If he can taste that? I don't blame him for wanting something else on his plate. Even you like a good potato, Connie teased with a grin. I guess that's true. Sasha accepted, practically pouting. Is it a potato? Another triple shake of the heads. Is it soup? Connie tried. Wait, is a stew a soup? Eren. Sasha blinked as she saw Eren's heads all look at each other. That's not a no? What are you idiots doing? Jean asked as he arrived with a yawn. Also, did the bastard get bigger again? Trust me, we're not ecstatic about it either. Hey Jean, Connie answered. Sasha wants to guess what Eren's first meal will be when he figures out how to turn human again. We've ruled out meat and potatoes, but he kind of seems unsure about soup? Sasha explained. You idiots. Obviously, the first thing he's going to want to eat is something special, like some family recipe only he or Mikasa knows, Jean said lately. Eren stiffened, looking at Jean in surprise. Ha, I think you got it, Connie remarked. What? It's the only sensible answer. You'd want something that reminds you of home. Don't you both have some family thing like that? Jean asked in annoyance. We have more in common with Jean than we like to admit. Dre. Shut your trap. You're not wrong, but yes, shut it. Svi. Dre rolled his eyes good-naturedly while the other heads looked annoyed. Elsewhere, Hannes was having a drink. Normally, he didn't touch much alcohol anymore, sans special occasions. Being offered some by the commander of the garrison seemed like a good occasion, lest he offend the man. Still, he kept his drinks on the conservative side. "Tell me, what do you think of your new position, Captain?" Pixis asked idly as they stood on top of Wall Rose. "It's a little confusing, everything," Hannes admitted thoughtfully as he looked down and watched Boris stretching and testing his now-healed wings. "I mean, I get it. You need someone to keep an eye on these big bastards. Eren was the first, so you had his classmates keeping watch over him." "Yes, keeping everything tight-lipped at the time was rather important, with how little we knew and understood," Pixis agreed. "Not just that," Hannes said knowingly. "You were all trying to appease Eren in a way." Pixis remained silent, glancing at the man with a single raised eyebrow. "You found out a cadet just out of training was turned into a giant monster and has no idea how to turn back. You didn't want him to freak out over his situation with a bunch of strangers just trying to control him. You didn't want him trying to bust out of this cage if it felt too stifling," Hannes said knowingly and without judgment. "Probably the smartest move. Eren's a good kid, but I can't imagine how hard this would be for him without his friends. Which is why you need me to be the adult of the group. Even if a few of them are more mature than me," he finished with a chuckle. Pixis shared a laugh as well. "A fair point, I suppose. But I don't see what you are confused by then." Hannes rubbed the back of his head. "On paper, only two kinds of people would actively want in this group if they really thought about it. Opportunists who want to get ahead in this new part of the military, and people just wanting to avoid any chance of fighting the Titans. This job ultimately doesn't involve much other than keeping an eye on these guys, and they're very well behaved so far." At that exact moment, Boris flew up from down below, soaring over the wall and making the two men nearly fall backward in surprise. "So far indeed," Pixis said as he looked up to see the flying giant turning to soar around the edge of Trost. "You can blame that Zoe woman," Hannes said with a head shake. "Commander? What is the end goal of this reason walk? Are we just a temporary thing, until our large friends figure out how to turn human again? Are we going to be traveling and fighting alongside them when they head outside the walls?" Pixis hummed. "Good questions. Ones I'm sure the cadets have had themselves. That Artler boy is certainly keen enough to wonder as much. But they likely assume we adults have a plan." "A bold presumption sometimes," Hannes said with a sigh. "I will admit that the future of this division is in flux, Captain. It is officially an extension of the Scouts, with some aid and oversight from the garrison. Say the Giants could now transform at will? The Reason Walk would likely be folded back into Scouts, with all members given their formal choice of where to go. But things are changing more so than you might know. It might be only a matter of time before the functions and capabilities of the Risen Watch are expanded." Hannes grunted in thought. "So, I just need to keep the boat from tipping over." "I suppose that is one way to see it," Pixis remarked. "And what do you think of these young soldiers of yours? All I know is I'm happy Eren got this power and not someone else. All that boy ever wanted was for us to take back the world outside the walls from the Titans. Someone else might have been too cowardly to use it, or too greedy to not take advantage of it. Eren though?" Pixis frowned suddenly. "Captain Hannes? Do you think it might be possible that Eren Yeager can change form but simply doesn't want to?" Hannes furrowed his brow. "No, why would?" Hannes trailed off in sudden thought. Pixis waited for his answer. "Well, not unless he thought he could never turn back into this scaly form," Hannes stipulated, looking down to where Eren was watching Boris fly. "Kid is stubborn enough that he'd hold on to it for as long as he could. But is there a reason to think he can't change back if he does take human form again?" "You're probably asking the wrong man for that," Pixis said with a chuckle. "From everything we've heard, Grisha was able to take on that form at least twice. What happened after that?" Hannes frowned. "Judging from what I've heard about the shifters, transferring powers like this might mean that—" Pixis nodded. "We have to assume that Grisha Yeager is dead, yes." Hannes tried not to dwell on that. Did that mean that Eren had been forced to eat his father? Oh. Did Grisha turn Eren into a Titan? Did it even work like that for these creatures? "I'm used to not knowing a lot," Hannes admitted with a frown. "I just missed the days when I didn't care that much about that." Pixis chucked in sympathy as the pair shared another drink. Meanwhile, the days went on for the Levi squadron. Every evening, they would stop and check on Grice before turning in, to make sure they were still in the same area as each other and to see if Grice had seen any more unusual sightings. And most nights it was nothing but a few Titans. "Something sticky?" Gildy asked, standing on the side of the wall next to Levi. "Gross," Levi deadpanned. A soldier with a cleaning obsession. Grice felt there was something cruel about that, but didn't voice it to the captain. "I hate to ask, but could it be possible some of your comrades have gone full animal and are—" Gildy trailed off meaningfully. Mating? Grice shook his head at that thought. Despite all this time, he still had no desire to figure out how crawlers reproduced. Not that kind of sticky. I couldn't see it well in the dark, but it was thick and solid, not gooey like that, Grice explained uncertainty as he looked out at the amethyst sky, the last of the light vanishing over the horizon. We'll be there tomorrow, Levi informed with a frown. Don't suppose this is reminding you of anything? Like a giant spider or something? Grice shook his head. Surprisingly, no. There was something shaped kind of like that, but there was no webbing or anything. Levi nodded. Get some sleep and any snacks you need. You may have to make a public appearance tomorrow. Wonderful. I'll try not to cause any heart attacks, Grice remarked, fully expecting a lot of panicking and screaming. He couldn't blame people really, but there wasn't much he could do to minimize it either. The two soldiers headed back to the top of the wall. Levi was about to head back down to rejoin the others when he noticed ELD pausing. What is it? He asked calmly. Sorry, Captain, it's just. ELD paused, glancing back down to the edge they just came over. Is it just me or is Grice getting bigger? You noticed too, Levi mused. It's not just the golden brat anymore. They're probably all getting bigger. But why? Have they been growing for all these years? ELD asked with a frown. No, Levi said, closing his eyes. Hang asked Grice if they ever had any notable growth before. To his knowledge, they've always been about the same height. But now they're getting bigger. So what changed? The question rang silently over them, unasked and unneeded. The answer was obvious after all, to Levi at least. Eren. How he didn't know. But Hang and the higher-ups already knew that the most likely catalyst was either Eren himself or otherwise connected to him. It was easy to see there was something different, more to that form compared to the other creatures. Grice's claim that his instincts, the more primal part of his monstrous form, was scared of Eren's own form? That only solidified it in Levi's mind. Still, there was nothing they could do. He was sure everyone was keeping something to themselves, but he was also sure of one other thing. They were all on the same side. Eren, Grice, the scouts, and even the queen. All of them were invested in protecting the people of the walls. He just had to hope it stayed that way while they all dealt with things as they came up. End of chapter. Well, already Grice and the Levi team are finding strange things going on just outside the walls. Burnt titans in pain and sticky stuff of unknown origins. Meanwhile, Sasha and Connie are Sasha and Connie, while Pixis and Hannes have a talk. Levi is very aware that Grice is keeping some things to himself, but everyone in this scenarios is assuming everyone is keeping some secrets. That feels like an innate part of the AOD setting. It was the day they would arrive at Kralva. Levi, naturally, thought it best to ride ahead with his team, to make sure the people on the walls didn't try aiming a cannon at Grice. Let me get this straight, Captain, the local garrison commander said with a frown. There is a giant monster that is going to climb up the wall. And you want us to spread the word to keep calm and not shoot at him? To your soldiers, yes, Levi answered, glancing down at the district of Kralva. He is only going to climb it if he has to. If something else gets within or on top of the walls. The captain gave a withered breath. I still have trouble believing all this about these creatures being our allies or humans turning into them, but if you're here, I suppose there is little doubt. Besides, Petra furrowed her brow at the man's uneasy look. The sightings have gotten worse. It's not just sightings anymore, he answered with a headshake. Cattle and horses have gone missing, possibly even people. Are you sure the animals weren't stolen? Gunther asked with a raised eyebrow. We suspected that as well until we found them again, the man explained as he pointed outside of Wall Rose. Oh. Aluo squinted as they all looked and spied something red and gory a small distance from the walls. That is a horse carcass. What's left of one, ELD said. Have you dash? We checked, it's one of ours. There are others around and further away and even within the walls. One of the cows seems to have fallen off the top of the wall, the garrison leader explained. Something is grabbing snacks and dropping their leftovers, Levi remarked as he glanced up. Have any of the sightings been in the day? Only on the darkest days when the clouds are thick and heavy, he answered, glancing up uneasily. We've had more and more of those lately. Right? Levi said as he decided what to do. Spread the word about our large friend. Remember, he can talk and can't fly. We'll bring him over and get him up to speed. I'll do my best, Captain, the garrison leader assured with a salute before leaving to do so. This doesn't bode well, Levi said as he pulled out his flare gun. Something stinks about this. Literally, Captain, or? Petra asked curiously. We pass through one village a day at least getting here. On either side of the wall, we and Grice didn't see any corpses left around. So, what has our friends so focused on this place? Maybe they just see this district as some kind of giant nest to plunder for food? Gunther suggested. Maybe, Levi acknowledged without agreeing as he held up the gun and fired it. It went up high into the air as the bang rang over the area. And then, the Levi squad and all of Kralva looked up in shock as they heard it. Screeching. High-pitched, bestial screeched from high above the clouds. Captain? Aluo called out, hands on his blades with a nervous sweat on his brow. That sounds like a lot more than one of them. It did. It definitely did. Elsewhere, Grice looked up at the noise bellowing down from the skies like some unholy war cry. And he felt wariness grow in him. I don't like the sound of that. Neither did his beast by the feel of it. Maybe we should have brought Eren after all, Grice said before shaking his head and running to the wall. He couldn't just leave Levi and the others on their own. After all, Eldians had to look out for each other. No one else was. That much was still true. Meanwhile, clouds churned and thunder cracked over Trost. Eren looked up, and within so did something else. Eren? Mikasa called from his leftmost head. What is it? Get off my head. Dre. You'll get hit by lightning. Zwei. Eins. Mikasa. Historia called out from down below, yelling over the wind. Eren is worried about you getting hit by lightning, and so am I. Right? Mikasa said reluctantly as she jumped off his head, using her ODM gear to move lower to safety. Eren still kept looking up. He knew the voice of the storm was watching as well. What is it? Eren. A challenge? Meanwhile, the winds had begun to pick up by the time Grice scaled the wall. The top was much busier with soldiers than in Trost, but he made sure to avoid knocking over the cannons. Levi. Grice called out as he scanned for the short scout. Here. Petra called nearby. Soldiers ducked under him, mindful of his legs and tail as he passed over them to join them. Looks like we showed up just in time. Any idea what we're dealing with? Levi called up to the creature. Not yet, Grice answered, cocking his head up at the clouds. Let me try something. Inhaling deeply, Grice let out a great screech of his own, calling up into the sky. The air grew eerily silent. Something dropped out of the sky. It descended like a comet before its wings unfurled and opened wide to stop its fall, landing on the surface as soldiers fled from where they might be crushed. Levi narrowed his eyes as he took the creature in. It was only 7 meters tall. Small to a titan or to Grice for that matter. It was shaped like a bat but with scales and horns covering the head and part of the torso. Despite it being able to fly, the wings looked to be in rough shape. It snarled and sniffed at the air while looking in their general direction. Grice, what's the verdict? Levi called up, getting silent. Grice. I don't recognize this one, Grice said slowly. What do you mean you don't recognize them? Levi asked, gripping his blades tighter. I mean this isn't one of my comrades, Grice answered uneasily. I don't know what this is. Lessers of the Lesser Storm. But his beast did. It definitely recognized them. He could see it, some faded memory. A swarm of creatures flying forth from a storm, heralding something that lurked within the clouds. The creature screeched at them. Grice instinctively roared back at the bat beast and took a step forward. Can't you translate still? Olu yelled out. There's nothing to translate. That roar was just a roar. Grice retorted as he stared down the creature. The bat beast cocked its head for a moment before it growled. Levi had a very good idea that it was a growl of hunger. Here it comes. The creature lurched forward, screeching to attack them. Levi held out his arm to stop his team. Grice was also happy he didn't jump the gun as several cannons went off, the creature being struck by the cannonball, one tearing its side and wings with a painful scream. Grice took the opening and swung his tail, throwing the creature over the edge. No one cheered, no one celebrated, because they could still hear the sound from up above. Soldiers, point your cannons up. Grice called out loudly before turning to the city below. Everyone, stay inside, they'll pick you off the streets. Some hesitated to listen to the monster, but none could fault the logic of those orders. They were never designed to shoot upward like that, Petra said grimly as they all drew their weapons. We'll have to make do, Levi said as he stared up at the sky. What are they waiting for? The lesser storm is coming with blackness and death. They await command. Grice blinked as he processed that. These things were smart enough to take commands? To wait to fill their stomachs? The wind suddenly shifted harshly. So strong was it that some soldiers nearly lost their footing. And just like that, they descended as a swarm. Fuck, that's a lot of them, Gunther whispered. There were dozens, at least 2 and maybe 3. Cannons fired, but most fell short of their marks or missed entirely. Soldiers were snatched from the walls and cannons were knocked aside as the creatures landed. Everyone move. Find their weak points. Levi ordered as they took off on their gear, he and his team already engaging two different ones while Grice's tongue shot out, dragging one by the neck down to him as he bit at the creature. It struggled until Grice finally broke the neck. They're going for the civilians. Olu informed as he saw more of the creatures heading down into the city itself. Go down and help them. Get people hiding inside. Grice called out as he swatted one away with his tail. I'm a huge target up here and a meal to them. He's right. Levi called down as he landed on the chest of a creature, blades stabbing into the heart. The hide wasn't tough enough to stop his blades, the creature collapsing as Levi jumped off it. You four head down and help the people. Grice and I will try to thin them out up here. Captain, the others called out before descending away. And don't go for the neck, you'll just break our blades. Levi called out at the last second. Grice roared as one landed on his lower back, swirling around to tear it off. He bit off the wing before tossing the bat beast outside the walls. The fall might not kill it, but it would keep them out of the fight for the moment. He looked up and, for half a second, he marveled at Levi as he used his ODM gear to launch from bat to bat. They might as well be buildings and statues to the strongest soldier of the walls until he laid them low. Below. Grice's head snapped down and saw one flying up the side of the wall, trying to catch him by surprise. And in its claws was someone, a soldier screaming in terror. Please, help me. I don't want to die. Grice growled to himself as he gripped the edge of the wall. It paid that his body was relatively light compared to his own strength. He leaped off, swinging from one side to grab the bat beast with his tail, startling it. The bat bit at his tail, but Grice slammed it onto the wall back first. It snarled and screeched but did not release its prey. Grice moved like a snake, his tail releasing his foe as he snapped around and latched his long maw onto the bat beast's leg. With one arm on the creature's chest, he ripped the leg off with a geyser of blood spraying before the monster fell off the side of the wall. Thank you, the soldier said uncertainly as he moved out of the twitching talons that held him. Just get out of here. Grice yelled as more of the creature descended on him. 3 for 7 and it went on. Grice and Levi fought them as best they could, to the point where the bat beasts were mainly focusing on the pair. Grice began to get into the rhyme of it. Not just fighting but fighting with Levi. Both tried to watch out for when their foes tried to outflank either of them. But Grice wasn't sure how long they could keep this up. He wasn't Eren. These bites and cuts were beginning to add up. Then, suddenly, something shifted in the fight. The bat beasts collectively looked to the sky and something churned within the clouds. What now? Levi muttered as he saw something behind the clouds. Something large and glowing? The battle across the entire city ceased as the sky was filled with light. As if the heavens answered a desperate prayer for salvation, the clouds parted with an intense wind that pushed them away and opened the skies once more. The swarm of creatures cried out in pain as the rays and the sun touched them. They instantly began to fly away, fast to escape the event and low to avoid coming near the mass of light and warmth. Is that an angel? Petra whispered in shock as every human looked up at the celestial light radiating down up Kralva as if promising them protection and safety. More than a few soldiers dropped their weapons in awe, many people falling to their knees with hands clasped in prayer for what seemed like a divine act. And Levi, standing atop the corpse of one of the bat beasts, squinted his eyes at the new arrival. Is that a moth? Holy shit, I thought I imagined the dreams with this giant bug, Grice murmured in shock as he picked himself off the ground, staring up at the lying giant uncertainty. Sky Queen, your kind protector. You safe, we safe. Well, at least his beast was confident about that. With another great flap of the wings, the enormous moth shed the great light from her wings, falling like pollen across the city. With more grace than a giant bug had any right to have, the moth landed softly on the walls and waited. Grice cautiously treaded along the wall back up, the moth already facing him. She wasn't that tall, just over 3 meters tall, much shorter than him or most titans. But her wings. He could only marvel at them. 2 blue spots that looked almost like eyes, bright against them mostly orange appendages. From tip to tip they were as wide as the walls were tall. By that metric alone she dwarfed him. And there was something more about her that he could not place. She slowly raised her claw-like limbs, as if greeting him while letting out a genuinely beautiful call. Hello. Grice was stunned by the voice. He didn't recognize it, but it sounded so kind, so soft and as human as any of his comrades. Who are you? I have many names. protector of humanity, his great ally, mother of light. But I prefer Mothra. Mothra. That name seemed to mean something deep down in his soul. Listen carefully. You must return. The enemy of the sun has come to give challenge for the title of Lord of the Storm. Grice shook his head. I don't understand. Enemy of the sun? Challenge who? Mothra spread her wings wide. You know who? The one who is many. Grice stiffened as the image of Eren flashed in his mind. But that name, that title. The one who is many. Something within him felt fear at the very title and he did not know why. Tell him he has been challenged by the lesser storm. And the Golden Demise will respond, for that is his nature. Wait, I don't dash, Grice called out, only for Mothra to begin to flap her wings. I'm sorry, Grice. I only have so much time. And with that, she took off, soaring up high to vanish into the clouds, every bit like the angel she seemed to be. Well, that just happened, Grice said slowly. How did she know my name? You mind explaining for the rest of us? Grice turned around and saw Levi approaching him. We need to head back to Trost, Grice said suddenly. Now. But what if those things attack again? Levi pointed out with a frown. That's where they're going, Grice said pointedly. They're hunting for our golden friend. Levi started before nodding. Wait here. I'll have my team stay behind just in case. Grice accepted that. And I need a snack after all that fighting. I'm going to go over the wall and take a bite of these dead bastards quickly while you do that, he said before scaling down the wall to do just that. Levi looked over the city of Kralva. It was damaged but nothing like Trost had been. A few dozen people were dead or hurt, but compared to the worst-case scenario, this was fairly tame for casualties. Now, he just had to figure out how to explain to Hang that a giant moth came down to save the day, looking like some kind of celestial angel. End of chapter. Well, they made it to Kralva. And they found the source of the rumors. Oversized bats. These were from a MonsterVerse comic called Kingdom Kong. Needless to say, they are the herald of the real problem to come. But then Mothra showed up and kind of threw things for a loop. So, yeah, Eren and Compan don't just have Marley to worry about, not just monster shifters who have been taken over by Theer monsters, but just good old kaiju who are still around and kicking. Hope you enjoyed that bit of action and twist. It had taken a lot of talking and tearing down her defenses, but Ymir found that her relationship with Historia was finally moving in a positive direction. Though, be honest with me. You didn't forgive me just because I got an expiration date and you feel bad for me, did you? Ymir asked, feigning idleness to hide her concern. No, Historia answered as they walked through Trost. It might have sped it up a bit, but I was always planning to forgive you. Assuming you're honest with me from now on. Well, I have a few secrets left. Like where my birthmark is and what it looks like, Ymir said slyly. You mean the thing on your butt that looks like the number 8? Historia asked with a chuckle. Ymir started and blushed. How did you know? She asked grumpily. How indeed, Historia said coyly, finger to her chin. Well, Historia is definitely a bit eviler than Krista, Ymir said with a sigh. Am I? Historia asked with a head tilt. Don't worry. I like it when you're evil, Ymir said with a flushed grin. Oh, so you want me to do evil things to you, and I just realized how that sounds? Historia changed her tune quickly, blushing fiercely. Shame. I wanted to know where you were going with that, Ymir said coyly. Well, you two are in a good state it seems. Holy shit. Ymir exclaimed, jumping away from Hang, who had spoken up from right behind them. Hello. Hang greeted, smiling with a wave of her hand. Yeah, personal space, 4 eyes. Ymir warned with a wary glare. What's wrong, Ymir? It's just Hang, Historia pointed out in confusion. Historia, you are not the Titan shifter here. You are not the one worried she might go near your butt, Ymir reminded cautiously. I mean, I could always have Historia be my hands-on assistant for any experiments regarding you, Hang offered with a knowing grin. I might retract several of my protests if you do, Ymir said, still uncertain. Might. Wait, what? What am I being volunteered for this time? Historia asked with wide eyes as she looked between them repeatedly. Nothing. Yet, Hang answered with a chuckle. Would you two mind coming with me? Us? Ymir questioned with a raised eyebrow. Well, really just Historia, but you're free to tag along, Ymir. Gee, thanks, I feel so wanted around here. So, who is this about? The golden prick, the whiny bitch, or Boris? Ymir asked expectantly. Why doesn't Boris get a nickname? Historia asked with a raised eyebrow. Still working on that one, Ymir admitted with a shrug. It actually is about Boris. Hang explained with an excited grin. As you probably know, he's healed up and recently started flying again. It is a bit hard to miss something that big flying in the air, Historia admitted. At any rate, I wanted to research how flying works for him among other things. And I need you to translate for me, Hang explained. Ymir snorted as they started walking. You have an interesting job translating for monsters and keeping me on a figurative leash. We could make it a literal leash, but you two might get some interesting looks for that, Hang teased, making the two blush and fall silent. The trio eventually made their way over to the opening near the breach, where they heard a rather loud snoring echoing over them. They came in and looked over to see Ellie sleeping on a collapsed building, much like a dog would on a rug. That can't be comfy, can it? Ymir asked over the snorting. Hang shrugged while looking over to where Eren was. Several others of the Reason Walk were with him and watching Boris as he coiled near the center, flexing his wings while the serpent waited for them. Hang, there you are. Finally, I was getting anxious, Boris said with impatient relief. Hello, Historia Ymir. Hi, Boris, Historia greeted as they waved. Boris, my skyward slithering subject. Are you ready to help me unravel the marvel that is your flying? Hang asked enthusiastically. Boris looked mildly disturbed by her energy but nodded all the same. I'm not sure how helpful I'll be. I just flap my wingus and after a point, instincts take over. Hang just chuckled as Historia translated, her glasses glistening in the sun. Oh, let me worry about that. Right, Ymir said awkwardly. I'm just going to go see what the others are up to while you three do this. Say hi to everyone for me, Historia said as Ymir started to leave. I will. And Boris? Give us a shout if Hang tries to violate you or anything, Ymir called over her shoulder. Thank you, just what I needed to hear, Boris grumbled with a headshake. I'm never living that down, I guess, Hang remarked calmly. You don't sound terribly upset about that, ma'am, Historia pointed out. I am not, Hang admitted with a grin before turning fully to Boris, pulling out a notebook to take notes. Now let's begin. Please open your wings and start moving them in place so I can see how they move. Well, look what Krista dragged in, Connie said with a chuckle, only to get slapped upside the head by Sasha. What was that for? Idiot, it's Historia now, remember? Sasha reminded with a sigh. Connie waved her off dismissively. Historia, Krista, whatever. She's the cute blonde angel of the 104th. Trust me, she's not that much of an angel anymore, Ymir said with a knowing smile. Eren made a call with one of his heads, which nodded in place. Eren agrees, Mikasa remarked, sitting up on a nearby rooftop. Ymir gave Eren a blank glare. Still kind of annoyed you got to taste her first. All three of Eren's heads gave her unimpressed looks before letting out a roar towards the trio at the center. What? Ymir, what the fuck are you telling them? Historia screamed from across the area. Her voice was so loud, it actually startled Ellie awake with a confused whine as she looked around. Seeing nothing was wrong, she settled back down to observe Hang, Boris, and Historia. Wow, she really does have some bite in her, Connie said with a chuckle. You prick, what did you say to her? Ymir hissed up at Eren, who only snorted. I didn't say shit, Historia. Eren's just being a prick. He better be, or so help me. Historia warned before returning to her work with Hang with a huff. Hang and Boris shared a look but wisely chose not to comment on the interruption. Right, could you repeat what Boris was saying again? Hang requested casually. Oh, I am so getting back at you for that one day, Ymir promised, glaring up at the three-headed behemoth. It's mainly just his right head, Mikasa informed, glancing at his head. Right, the pissy one, Ymir recalled, glaring at the specific head. Ainz readily, eagerly glared back. Is this still about nearly biting your neck off? Look, if you want to bite a piece of me off or something, you can. Hell, I'm sure Four Eyes over there would love the chance to watch my regeneration up close and in person, Ymir offered in frustration. Zwei and Dre looked at one another before looking pointedly at Ainz, who growled off to the side. The other two would actually like this settled. They don't hold a grudge as much as he does. They'll try and get him to agree to it, Mikasa deciphered, all three heads nodding in confirmation, even Ainz, albeit in annoyance. You know, it's almost scary how you can do that without whatever Historia has going for her, Ymir said with a sigh. Where's Armin anyway? Up here. Ymir blinked as Zwei tilted his head down to show that Armin was just behind the horns, holding onto them for stability. Do I want to know? Ymir questioned with hands on her hips. We're practicing landing and staying on Eren's heads, Sasha informed bluntly. It is not as easy as it looks. And his scales can fuck you up if you land on them the wrong way, Connie added, holding up his hand to reveal it was covered in bandages. Huh. You think we'll ever need to use this? Ymir asked curiously. Look, if Eren comes to save my ass? Be it from titans, monsters, or crazy people across the sea. I'm not dying just because my foot slipped off his shiny-ass head, Connie said flatly. That would be a lame way to die, Ymir agreed, glancing at Mikasa. Let me guess, you already mastered it? I didn't know it was difficult for others, Mikasa answered simply. Just don't make any jokes about Mikasa stepping on Eren, you'll make both of them mad, Sasha whispered rather loudly. Mikasa and Eren mutually and independently decided to let that one go. Come to think of it, Armin called out as he descended on his odium gear. Eren? How about letting Ymir have a go? Ainz looked mildly offended by the idea, and so did Mikasa. Armin, you trying to cause some kind of weird drama in this mess? Sasha asked warily. Armin ignored them as he explained, focusing mainly on Zwei. I remember from before. Everything, that Reiner and the others didn't seem to have any issue with it, landing on your head and everything without falling off. Maybe shifters have a better sense of balance. All three of Eren's heads were mildly intrigued now while glancing at Ymir. Maybe? I mean, it's not one of those impressive side benefits they'd list off you having like regenerating and everything, but I can see that being a thing, Ymir remarked with uncertainty as she glanced up at Eren, specifically, Dre. Can I get the nice one for this? Dre beamed a bit and lowered his head while Zwei kept an eye on Ainz, the wrathful head looking away in a huff. Mikasa decided to leap off the rooftop to take a spot on Ainz's head, taking a seat on his brow and patting his head. Again, Minnie made the wise choice to ignore that while Ymir climbed onto Dre's head. Oh shit. You weren't kidding about fucking up your hand, Ymir said with a hiss as she received a deep cut on her hand which was, mercifully, already healed by the time she got up to stand on Dre's forehead. Well, this isn't so bad. Ymir nearly bit her tongue off in surprise as she was brought high into the air, the head ascending to his normal elevation. Connie laughed. Yeah, it's like your ODM going off by accident. Real gut punch, right? He called up with mirth. Shut it, you bald bastard. Ymir yelled as she steadily stood up. She blinked and realized that even as Dre moved about, she had little issue keeping her balance. Okay, I guess being a shifter does give better balance. Explains why we were all top of the class. Zwei gave a growling hum as he observed Ymir in a rather obvious fashion. Ymir looked to the middle head with a mild look. You know, you're a lot like Hang. Minus the hangness. Dre let out a reptilian equivalent of a laugh while Zwei appeared neither amused nor annoyed by the gesture. I take it back, you remind me more of the shrimp, Ymir deadpanned. Ainz growled at that. He disagrees with that, Mikasa remarked. Yeah, I got that, Ymir said with a sigh. All conversation stopped as a breeze came over them, causing them to look to see Boris finally taking off into the air. His long, serpentine form moved with an almost majesty grace as his wings flapped to take him above the city. Below, Hank's pencil moved at a dizzying pace as she took down her many observations. Can you imagine the view from up there? Sasha asked with a smile as they all stared up at Boris. Eren could. A bit too clearly. The feeling of rising above the mountains and soaring free of gravity itself, to watch the world become a shrinking mass beneath him as he rose higher and higher until the sky turned black and the stars shone clearer than ever he had seen. Truly to reach that would be, to Dre. Absolute, Zwei. Real, I freedom? Eren started at the thought. It was not his own and yet, it almost had been. Wow. Ymir said as she wobbled on his head. Hey, what happened? You get your tails in a knot. Eren. Are you okay? Mikasa asked, glancing from the head she was on to the other two. Zwei nodded and grunted in confirmation. Mikasa didn't buy it. He didn't expect her to. Hey, what's up with Boris? Armin asked out loud, drawing their attention to the sky. Boris's flight suddenly changed from circling above Trost into a glide towards the west. What's going on? Hang asked, glancing at Historia. Did he say anything? I think he sees something over the walls, Historia answered before calling up. What is it, Boris? Boris roared back down before he disappeared beyond the wall, and Hang was distinctly aware of Ellie rising in and Eren moving forward, neither of them looking relaxed anymore. I guess practice time is over, Ymir said as Dre lowered his head for her to jump off. Historia frowned as she translated for Boris. He says it's Grice, he's running back here. Very quickly. Hang frowned. Something wasn't right. The procedure was for Levi or someone else on his team to give Trost some warning, so they knew it was Grice in advance and not a wild crawler that came to Walrose. Boris suddenly returned overhead, calling to Historia and Hang once more. He says that Levi is riding Grice? And that they said there is an emergency? Historia translated, growing worried about the implications. Hang nodded with a scowl, pocketing her notebook. I'll go make sure they make it over okay. You stay here with Eren and the others, we'll all meet up here. Historia nodded as Hang took off for the wall. The blonde glanced up wondering why she had a bad feeling about all of this. Given that Boris was still circling with a nervous energy of his own, she supposed she wasn't the only one feeling that way. What's up? Emer asked as she came over to her. What's got the big bastards all spooked? Grice is back and so is Levi, Historia answered. Grice? Emer said with a frown. Didn't they say he and the shrimp wouldn't be back for at least another few days? Historia nodded silently, and that was enough for Emer. Situations like this rarely come with purely good news. When Hang reached the top of the walls around Trost, she was unsurprised to see Levi there, having already put the soldiers on the wall at ease. So, you really did ride on Grice? She asked, her eagerness tempered by what she felt was a serious situation. It was a pain in the neck for him literally, Levi said, looking down at his odium gear, which had some discolored and dried blood. Disgusting. At least Titan blood disappears. Oh, I'm sorry for bleeding all over the cable you stabbed into me, Grice said as he climbed up next to them, careful not to step on anyone as the nearby soldiers made room for him. It was your idea, Levi reminded. Grice, Levi, Hang. All three turned to see Erwin approaching them. Sir, Hang greeted with a brief salute, Levi nodding. Commander Erwin? Grice spoke up with a troubled growl. We have a problem. A big one and it's coming here. Erwin nodded. I understand, but first? What is the status of Kralva and your team, Levi? He asked the shorter man. My team is fine. They're keeping an eye on Kralva in case something happens there again. The city was attacked, but we managed to drive the problem off with help. Casualties were minimal, thankfully, Levi explained. Sir, the Rudos and most of the Riesenwalk are gathered down there, Hang informed, nodding to the area near the breach where the other three giant beasts were gathered. Might as well as only tell the story once, right? Grice remarked, tilting his head at Erwin. He understood the need to keep some information need to know, but if anyone should be in the loop, it had to be his fellow monsters in the Riesenwalk. Erwin nodded as he looked down at them. We'll gather there immediately, he said before glancing at Grice and Levi. How long do we have? We have no idea, Levi admitted. Then I'll assume we have none at all, Erwin decided. It was only a few minutes later that they had all gathered with the others. In all the commotion, Jean and Marco had arrived with Hannes to see what all the commotion was about. The four great beasts formed a half-circle with their human comrades to one side. There may not be much time, Erwin said preemptively before any questions could be asked, looking to Levi and Grice. Tell us everything. And explain they did. End of chapter. A bit of the weirder slice of life, ending on Levi and Grice making Thea return to warn everyone about the bats coming to Trost to attack Eren. Yeah, things are going to get messy fast. You're saying giant bats are hunting Eren? And they were driven off by a giant, angelic moth? Hang said slowly, eyes wide with fascination. Trust me, there isn't a better word for it, Levi said with a sigh. Damn thing had wings as big as the walls are tall. Connie whistled. That's big. That would make the wings span twice the size of the colossal titan, Armin remarked absently, looking up as he tried and failed to imagine it properly. She called herself Mothra, Grice added as he glanced at his comrades and Eren, each of them as confused as himself. Erwin noticed the exchange and frowned at the thought that came to mind. Grice, you said these bat creatures and this Mothra weren't part of your allies. Is it possible that others discovered the cave where you found the substance that turned you all? Ellie and Boris had dark looks about that, the prospect of Marley getting a hold of this same power. These forms, despite everything, were the only advantage they had against the might that Marley wielded with numbers and titans. And technology, given the state of parity. Maybe, but I don't think that's what's going on, Grice said as he looked down and shifted about uncomfortably. This Mothra, she talked to me but she didn't seem human. I think she's natural for lack of a better word. A creature that massive and intelligent enough to communicate with humans? Hang exclaimed in fascination, a wide and almost crazed smile on her face. Oh, the things I would love to ask her. Grice seems pretty convinced she's on our side and I can't deny that, Levi mused. But what I don't get is what these bats want with the golden brat. You said something about challenging him, but why? It could simply be a matter of territory, Erwin remarked, looking down at Eren. The three heads furrowed each of their brows. That could be true. Eren paused and mentally turned his attention inward. This is the challenge you were talking about? Eren. Yes. That simple answer was growled out, promising things worse than a mere death for this foe. Eren? He jolted his attention to the present, looking to Mikasa, who gave him a concerned look, as were others. Are you okay? Mikasa asked. Grice shared a look with Boris and Ellie. We should tell them, Boris said with a sigh, Ellie nodding. Eren looked at them in surprise. But Dre looked resigned as Zvi nodded in agreement, and Ainz made no protest. Historia remained silent until all the creatures looked at them. Commander Erwin, everyone? They have something they want you to know, she informed. And I don't think they want Grice letting anyone over here. Levi, Hang, and Erwin grew serious as Jean sighed. Oh boy, what is it this time? Eren was the one who spoke, and Historia calmly translated. They haven't told you everything about these forms. They didn't lie, but they left something out. Something they can't explain and something they doubt any of us can help them with. Bold of you to make that assumption for yourself, brat, Levi said with narrowed eyes. Ainz growled warningly at the soldier. That's enough, Erwin said before tempers could flare. Did this secret pose a threat to us? No, we told you about it, we just didn't explain everything, Grice said with a sigh, nodding for Eren to continue. Historia listened with a troubled look. They told us they have a risk of going primal, of reverting to the instincts that these monstrous forms possessed, Historia continued. What they didn't mention was Dash. They have their own personalities, don't they? Aang asked knowingly. Wait, what? Sasha questioned blankly. Personalities? As in, their own identities. Armin questioned, mind flashing back to the hellish red-orange eyes Eren's form had when he nearly devoured him alive. How did you know? Ellie asked in surprise, all the giants looking to Hang with similar expressions. You don't need to translate, Hang waved off with a smile as she looked up at Grice. There were some tells you gave away, but mostly? It was that time with Eren in the battle against the shifters. Eren let loose a reptilian sigh and nodded. I should have guessed she'd figure it out. So, when you say go primal, you mean the minds of these creatures are trying to take over? Levi summarized, getting nods. Marco looked around with an uncertain frown. I'm confused. Thank God it's not just me, Connie said in relief. How is this different from what they said happened? The instincts taking over? Marco finished in bewilderment. Because that sounded less insane, Grice answered flatly. And, Historia spoke up, translating for Eren again. It's not just personalities. Eren and the others can see some of their memories too. Ymir blinked. Memories? Like how some of the 9 get memories from the shifter before them. Maybe? Grice answered uncertainly. You're not seeing the bigger implication, Hang said. These creatures existed. They are remembering the lives these creatures lived. Things like this were running around in the world? Sasha asked with a hint of dread. When was that? A long, long time ago, Historia translated for a wary Eren. Tell me, Historia, how long have you known about this as well? Erwin asked with a raised eyebrow. Many heads looked to the translator, who was fairly unsurprised by all of this. I could hear Eren's talking during the battle before Eren took back control. I had a vague idea of everything after that, she explained vaguely, glancing at the commander. What about you, sir? Hang told us her theory right after your royal sister left, Levi remarked. So, you hid this shit because we can't help you with a battle that is literally in your own heads. That about right? It didn't change anything from what we said, so, yes, Grice answered. You're not wrong, Erwin agreed as he looked up at Grice. So there must be a reason why you're telling us this now? Grice nodded. Mothra used a lot of titles when she spoke. She said the one coming is the eternal enemy of the sun, and he was coming to challenge for the title of Lord of the Storms, or something like that, against. Grice hesitated as he looked at Eren. He who is many. All at once, Boris and Ellie shifted, almost fearfully as Eren's neck coiled, strangely glancing behind himself. What's got them all spooked? Jean asked warily. I don't like this, Sasha said with a shiver. Erwin frowned. Eren, is yours listening? Historia swallowed thickly at Eren's hissing answer. He's always listening. Is that normal for yours and the others? Hang asked Grice, even if she suspected the answer already. The crawler shook his head. Mine pipes in every now and again about food and danger. But something about Eren's makes the beast shiver in fear. And we can tell when it's paying attention to us. An apex predator, perhaps? Hang mused absently. More importantly, from the sounds of it, It seems that these bat creatures aren't actually targeting Eren so much as the creature this form originally belonged to. Eren nodded in agreement, feeling the storm's presence closer than normal. Wait, Connie spoke up, rubbing his head. Okay, this is all making my head hurt, but doesn't this mean that this moth thing? Grice said she seemed natural or something. But that means she's some really old creature too. The bald brat makes a point, Levi remarked, looking at Emer. You sure there was nothing like this running around out there? Look, I grew up in a literal-ass cult, but even to me this all sounds kind of crazy, Emer remarked. So, what do we do about these bats? Levi, I need you to describe these creatures in detail, along with any weaknesses you noticed, Erwin instructed before looking up at the creatures. But knowing their target does give us an advantage. Eren spoke up, prompting Historia to translate. Eren wants to know if he should remain outside the walls of Trost, to lure them away? But that'll just put you in danger, Mikasa countered with a scowl. They're right. We can control the battle better within Trost, Erwin agreed, looking up at the cloudy skies. We should assume they'll attack at any moment. With that, the commander left with Levi and Hang to make plans for the looming danger. Great. I knew we'd end up fighting some of these monsters eventually, Jean said with a sigh. Just wish we didn't have to fight something that can fly. I'm not a coward or anything, Sasha spoke up carefully. But maybe we should just leave this to Eren and the others here? The bats aren't that big compared to us and they're not hard to kill, Grice remarked with a headshake. But there are a lot of them. Though, I get the feeling their leader will be trouble. Right, so, you really weren't going to tell us there was a monster lurking in your head? Jean asked up at Eren. Eren answered first. He was honestly worried he might be going crazy before Grice told him about his own experiences, Historia explained. I'm guessing the other bastard was in charge when you tried attacking me and almost ate Armin? Emer guessed. Dre groaned out as he looked down at the memory, Einz glaring back at nothing, and Zwei just nodding in confirmation. It's fine. Even if I didn't know the exact situation, I was sure Eren would snap out of it if I yelled at him enough, Armin said with a sheepish look. I think that was just shock. Because, when you start yelling it's kind of surprising, Connie remarked with a grin. I don't want to say it's like a mouse roaring, but... Marco trailed off apologetically. Eren said nothing to defend his friend as the others had a point. Mikasa almost smiled at the exchange before her eyes trailed up to Eren. Something was coming to attack him because of this power he had. Because of the creature that might try to take over his mind. Levi was right. How did they possibly help Eren and the others against foes that live on their minds? Meanwhile, we'll need the garrison to help with this, Erwin commented. But Pixis isn't in the area currently. We'll need the highest-ranking garrison officer we can find for the area. I believe that Rico woman might have been promoted, but I'll have to check, Hang remarked. Are we going to ignore that the Golden Brat and his big friends finally fessed up? Levi asked with a raised eyebrow. Hang looked over to him with a frown. We already knew that there was more to those forms than just appearances and instincts. Like we said, we've suspected this for a while. We suspected there was even more than that to Eren's form, Erwin agreed as they walked. Currently, I'm more concerned about this Mothra and these bat creatures. Namely, why are they appearing now? Maybe they're just reacting to the Golden Brat transforming when this all started at Trost, and only now got here? Levi suggested. But why Eren and not Grisha? Erwin pointed out as he paused to look back at his subordinates. According to Grice, Eren's father had this form. Why didn't they arrive before? You have a good point, Hang said, cupping her chin. Maybe it has something to do with how he managed to retake human form? Maybe they thought Grisha, or the creature rather, was dead again. In any case, we can deal with and ponder all of that after this new enemy is driven off, Erwin remarked. I take it you already have a plan? Levi asked expectantly. Erwin nodded. From what you've mentioned, these bats do not have the toughest of hide, just hard spots to boot. And they die like any animal. Did you notice any regeneration? Hang asked curiously to Levi. He shook his head. They take a bit more to kill than you might think, but nothing like the Titans. Anything to the heart or brain is a death blow. Their wings are pretty easy to cut, but I wouldn't count on them dying from a fall. At that point, they're oversized rats. Most might think that calling these creatures oversized rats would be dismissing them as a threat. But Hang and Erwin both knew that Levi definitely considered rats to be a threat, even at normal size. There is the obvious probably, of course, Erwin said, looking back to where they had left the others. If the leader of these creatures has challenged Eren, then it believes it can win. We should expect a bigger bat, Levi summarized, at least as big as the brat. Bigger maybe, Hang said, cupping her chin thoughtfully. Eren keeps getting bigger. We're still not sure why or how, but he is steadily growing bigger. Whatever is coming this way. I think it's expecting Eren to be full size. Any conversation stopped as they all felt a sudden shift in the wind. Their eyes went to the sky filled with clouds. Grice said this challenge was over a title, Erwin remarked. Lord of the Storms. We must assume that a storm will herald this creature's coming. A bat that can control the weather, Levi opined with a headshake. I might have thought that was a joke before I saw the angel moth myself. In any case, we should make preparations as soon as possible, Erwin said as he turned and began to lead them away again. It's strange though, Hang remarked. The Titan shifters transform with what appears to be bolts of lightning. Lightning or not, Eren can breathe something that looks the same. Now giant bats are concerned about a title regarding storms. Neither of the others commented on that, having nothing to add even if they agreed with that point. There was a connection there, but they had doubts either of them would figure it out before Hang did it herself. Meanwhile, we have to consider pulling out of here. I am considering it, Captain, Zeke assured as he took a long drag of his cigarette. Getting this information back to the mainland is invaluable, there is no denying that. Then why are you so determined to use this town as a trap? The Marleyan asked with a scowl. The enemy has taken 2 Titans from us and lost none of their new advantages, these giant monsters, Zeke remarked calmly. If we allow them to keep advancing, how long do you think until they might cross the ocean once more? The captain gritted his teeth at the prospect. We can't afford to let these island devils wreak havoc and unleash another Eldian empire on the world. Believe me, we are in agreement on this, Zeke said with a scowl about him. The idea of another Eldian empire but with these creatures? What a terrible hell that would turn this world into. Still, I feel this place is the best location to meet them, Zeke said as he looked at the breach in the wall that had allowed the Titans in years ago. They have to come here, we know that. If not here, we might not have the luxury of picking the battlefield we face them on. What is the end goal now then? Or do you still plan to aim for the coordinates even now? The captain asked. The coordinates has, unfortunately, become an optional objective in my mind. As important as it is, I would be more concerned with neutralizing these giants, Zeke said gravely. But if this next encounter is a failure, we will have to retreat. We may have to before that even. We haven't seen any of those crawling bastards or tusked mutts, but we've lost a lot of men. Much more and well? The captain reluctantly shook his head. It pains me to say this, but if we take too many deaths or injuries, we'd only be in the way. We'd have to fall back to the harbor and leave it to you Eldians. Was funny. Normally, a Marleyan would say that with distrust at leaving the Eldians with such an important job unsupervised, or they'd say it sarcastically while being thrilled to leave the danger to devils like them. But in this case, Zeke sensed neither from the captain. It was rather a sense of shame to him, for the Marleyans to have little to no part in fighting against these island devils. True, they never expected to play much of a role, but that was from lack of need. Now, it was just from a lack of ability. Being helpless, what a cruel feeling. If it comes to that, it might be best if you leave without us altogether, Zeke said with a frown. Because you are right, Captain. If nothing else, we must ensure the rest of the world learns of the dangers brewing on this island. The captain nodded grimly and left Zeke to his plans and thoughts. His eyes drifted up to the sky. It was growing late, but the cloud cover made it even darker. There might be a storm coming, he murmured to himself. No one is leaving before that passes by, at the very least. End of chapter. The calm before the storm, as it were, and everyone Findingo too about the other personalities that come with these forms. And the fact that Eren's is different from Tay others. But yeah, now everyone prepares for the battle with the bats as best they can. Hope that'll be a good fight to show everyone. My head still hurts, Sasha said as they all sat in the headquarters located within Trost. So Eren and the others turned into creatures that used to be alive, and those creatures might take over? Does that make them zombies? I hate that I have nothing to say against that, Jean muttered with a headshake. Maybe Sasha is onto something? Connie suggested, looking around the room. If they are like zombies or ghosts, maybe that's how Eren's dad took human form again? It just stopped haunting him or something? Eren's father had to have transformed more than once, Armin reminded. Grisha took human form, then transformed back into the creature to fight Frida. Historia shifted awkwardly at that, reminded of the death of the family she never got a chance to meet. Given that curse of a vow their ancestor had put on them, she wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. I'm more confused by there being other giant creatures, Marco said, rubbing his head. Titans are us Eldians, and some of us can apparently turn into creatures like Grice and Eren, but then there are these giant bats and other creatures that just exist? And the rest of the world never knew about them / Yeah, it's a real mess, Emer agreed while leaning against a pillar. Doesn't help that we're all keeping secrets. It would be easier if we all talked about this honestly, Marco agreed with a sigh. Given what we've learned about the origin of the walls, it's not really surprising, Armin said, putting his hands together and leaning against them. The commanders weren't sure if they could trust Frida and her government even after they decided to trust Eren and the others. Especially since they suspected there were more Titan shifters after Emer exposed herself. Emer waved half-heartedly in acknowledgement. There is the bigger issue, Jean said with a sigh. Even if that blockhead and the other big ones trust us, they can't exactly trust themselves, or whatever is lurking in the back of their heads at least. Especially Eren's, Mikasa said with a frown. Connie sighed heavily. You know, the one thing that doesn't surprise me is that Eren somehow got the scariest, maybe even angriest one of the bunch. I'm just surprised Eren could keep a secret, Sasha said thoughtfully. But I guess that's mainly just the middle one's doing. He is the smart one. Armin said nothing as he stood to journey over to Mikasa as she watched out the window. They could see Eren a few blocks away, all three of his heads gazing upwards at the clouded sky. He's waiting for whatever is coming, Mikasa said knowingly. Armin had a half-hearted smile. If he could, I'm sure Eren would have run off to meet this enemy of the sun on his own. Mikasa's expression was unchanged to most, but the subtle shifts told Armin she wasn't amused by the joke. Right, sorry, he said, gazing out to their friend. You're more worried about the one in his head, aren't you? And you aren't? Mikasa asked. The only time Eren has lost control of it was when he had to regrow all three of his heads. From what Grice has said, that's a better track record than most of the other giants, Armin pointed out reassuringly. Mikasa continued to look out the window and wished that it would help the unease she felt, but it did not. After all, it only added to how strange Eren's beast was compared to the others. Armin didn't say anything, but he shared Mikasa's sentiment in truth, because he remembered those hellish eyes that had glared at him before Eren took back control. He had thought those eyes were far too intelligent to be just instincts, that trying to eat him had been a deliberate and malicious decision on that creature's part. They had barely a day of tense silence before it began. Eren had never stopped watching the skies with 6 narrowed eyes. Even if he couldn't tell when, he could sense something was coming now, and that it was close. It was a strange feeling in his mind, much like this body's extra form of vision. It was like being in water and feeling the waves ripple against him as something approached. But these ripples were sharp and sudden, like a titan's footsteps. Or his own, he supposed. And he knew that this would be much more dangerous than the colossal titan. The whelp? Eren glanced back and inwards at the voice of the storm. What do you want? Eren. The voice was silent for a moment. Deal with this cretin or I will. Eren's attention was forced outward as thunder cracked in the distance. The wind began to pick up, brushing against his scales as black clouds quickly approached. They're here. Grice yelled out to everyone as he scaled the wall to reach the top, above where the breach had been. Run, 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 weedy, woody, woody, run, run, run. Grice growled at the crawler within his mind. Not a chance, he retorted harshly. Still, he didn't like the implications of it screaming at him to run and flee for his life. It hadn't acted like that when confronted with a swarm of these things, so whatever was coming. Damn. I thought we'd have a bit more time, Levi remarked with a frown as soldiers ran to their battle position and stocked up on their equipment. We've barely had time to prepare. We just advised everyone on how to fight these things, Hang said with a frown. Not to mention they've barely had time to practice with the new guns. We should never expect our enemies to be considerate of our time, Erwin remarked sagely as he joined them on the walls, their cloaks pulled harshly by the growing wind. We have prepared all we can for this new enemy. Now we must fight. Both nodded grimly at that, before bracing as a stronger wind came over them, courtesy of Boris descending with Historia anchored to his back by her odium gear. Using this chance, Historia disconnected and leaped off to land on the wall with the officers. Commanders, sir. Historia saluted in greeting. Boris says they'll be here any moment, and that so will he. They didn't need an elaboration on her meaning. Enemy of the sun, huh? Levi remarked, looking upwards again at the pitch-black clouds blanketing over them. He certainly lives up to the title, Hang agreed with a frown. Thunder cracked and roared as the soldiers ran to their position as rain began to pour from the heavens. This is crazy. How are we supposed to fight in this? A soldier at a cannon yelled over the wind. Like your life depends on it. Rico called out sternly as she walked along the walls. Because it does. She scanned the battlements as best she could. It was last minute, but every soldier now had a rifle on their back, ones capable of firing multiple bullets between reloads, and using small containers of bullets instead of gunpowder. Some of the lovely things coming from the government since the Queen took the throne, something many looked on in either relief or suspicion. But Rico had no time to ponder the political theater going on further within the walls. From up above, she heard the sounds of many creatures screeching. Boris flew in circles just below the top of the wall's height while Ellie made her way to the center with Eren, who watched the skies with an impatient glare. Eren, Ellie called out, almost whimpering. He's almost here. I know. Eren. He never once looked away from the blackened sky churning above him. Lightning began to strike. One hit a building in Trost. Another hit a cannon, making it explode and send shrapnel onto the soldiers. More and more it struck, as if the weather itself had become their enemy. His foe was trying to intimidate him, Eren knew, and it was pissing him off. He inhaled deeply, his neck coiling inward before he snapped his 3 heads and roared into the skies. It was long and loud, echoing over all of Trost. Even the very storm seemed to quiet before his call, many looking at him in surprise. Erwin narrowed his eyes. Keep your eyes up, he yelled his own command, bellowing and pulling others out of their stupor. The enemy has arrived. True to his words, the swarm of hellish bats burst from the clouds and descended upon the defenders of the wall like locusts upon a field of grain. Open fire. Rico called out, gunshots and cannons echoing over the city as the battle began. The barrage did not fell many of them. The wind and newness of the weapons made aiming the rifles hard, and the cannonballs often missed or fell before hitting a target. Still, the few that did fall were enough to spook the other bats near them. Most soldiers quickly switched to using their blades. Using ODM gear to fight at the top of the walls was less than ideal, let alone in this weather with these kinds of foes, but it was their best recourse. Screams echoed over Trost as many were killed and eaten by the hellbats, either swooping down on them before they could react or plucking them out of the air like morsels. Grice helped to fight them off as best he could, acting like bait once more, dangerous bait, his long tongue yanking an enemy out of the sky and crashing it into the wall. Levi led the charge in taking out many in the skies. If not for the eyes or heart, most went for the wings to send the monsters crashing down below. Aiding them was Boris, who swooped through, biting many of the foes and knocking more off flight with his greater size. The bats tried to bite and eat at him, but there was no coordinated effort to go after his wings to ground him. Still, some did, and those scratches added up. Hang led the forces that rushed through the city on ODM gear to put down any of the bats that survived falling. Injured wings did not make them helpless though, the giant creatures easily climbing and jumping around buildings. However, Ellie was more than ready to help them, running the bats down, snapping necks and biting off heads with her powerful jaws. A group of bats descended upon Eren, yet he did not move away. Instead, his throats began to glow with a hateful glow in his eyes. He opened his mouth and unleashed lightning from his maws. His blasts cut through flesh and bone, sending them tumbling around Eren as scorched corpses. Why isn't Eren doing anything? Sasha called out over the storm, hanging by the wall. He's waiting for their leader. Armin yelled back, his back to hers. Look out. They both rushed out of the way as a bat with a damaged wing fell on their location. At the interior edge of Trost's walls, Erwin observed all of this from his perch with Mishi and Nanaba nearby. All of this, and Eren remained at the center of the city. We're holding them back, but we'll be overrun if this goes on for too long, Nanaba said with a frown. Mishi sniffed the air. Something is up there. Something that smells foul. Erwin glanced back to their resident monster translator. Historia? Have you heard anything? Historia frowned. I can hear all of them, Commander. And they're all saying the same thing. Feast. Let us feast. Erwin frowned. They believe their leader has already won. Erwin incoming. Mishi yelled, weapons at the ready. Erwin looked up to see one of the bats finally heading in their direction. Emer now. Erwin called out. The shifter propelled herself up, having been waiting just below on the wall behind them. She bit her hand, lightning coming down as she shifted in midair. She landed on the bat, her teeth chewing through the neck and arms with ease before she leaped back and landed next to Erwin and the others. Historia smiled up at the jaw titan crouching protectively near them. What's this thing waiting for? Emer called out in her titan form. I was hoping to wait until the leader arrived, but we need to take advantage of how many we've lured in, Erwin said as he pulled out a flare gun. Sir? I don't think that'll be visible in this weather, Historia pointed out. Then it is a good thing it isn't meant to be seen, Mishi remarked to Historia's confusion. Erwin pointed the weapon towards the sky and fired it. A great ringing sound echoed over the sound, making the others grab their ears. An acoustic flare? Historia realized with a wince. You want to try it now, Erwin? Levi murmured as he and several others across Trost pulled out their own signal flares and aimed them toward the giant bats. The creatures screeched in pain and confusion as the sound waves hit their sensitive ears. We were right. It does at least disorientate them, Hang said, watching as one flew into a building. Ellie whimpered, having sensitive ears of her own, running off to target any of the grounded bats that weren't near any soldiers. We're doing better than I thought, Boris said as he observed the battle blow, looking for an ideal target of his own to attack. Boris? Grice's voice yelled from the wall, holding down a bat with one claw. Above you. Boris turned his serpentine head to the clouds again. He barely glimpsed the dark claws that came from the blackness, slicing through his side and one of his wings. Boris? Eren cried out in alarm as he saw their comrade fall like a stone. His body impacted the city with a small rumble. Smelling blood and seeing a sizable meal, many bats swarmed on the downed Boris. But even like this, Boris was not helpless as he used his snake-like body to lash out and avoid them as best he could, even as many began to scratch and bite into him. I got you. Ellie called out as she leaped forth and bit one off of Boris. Thanks, Ellie. Boris said gratefully. Looks like you guys could use a hand. Connie called out as he, Mikasa, Jean, and Marco joined the fray with a few others. Don't get too close to Boris and Ellie. Jean called out. You'll just get in their way. Focus on those around them, not on them. Eren watched that unfold with growing frustration and rage as he saw his friends hurt and in danger. As the battle raged on all over Trost, his 6 eyes looked back to the sky with hate dripping from his maw. Come face me, you coward. Eren. His challenge was roared long and hard. A screeching roar answered back. All at once, the bats began to fly up and away from their foes. What now? Jean muttered as he stood near Connie, who was nursing a wounded leg. Marco, get him to safety while they're not attacking. Don't worry about my ass, it's just dislocated. Mikasa? Any chance you can pop it into damn IT? Connie exclaimed as Mikasa casually and effortlessly snapped the bones back into place. Give a guy a moment to brace himself, Connie said with gritted teeth. We should move, Mikasa said, looking up at the skies as the bats that now circled around the edges of Trost. Everyone practically held their breath for the moment to pass and the true enemy to descend. When it did, many soldiers fell backward in terror. Like something from the mouth of hell, the enemy of the sun descended. A great bat, far larger than any of the others. Nearly 50 meters long with a wingspan that was more than double the height of walls at over 120 meters. 2 massive horns were upon the head, like a crown, above faded white eyes that possessed an almost demonic glow to them. His massive wings looked to be in tatters but also covered in deadly long spikes. Much of him was covered in hardened skin like armor. He was gray with a mane of black fur on his back and neck. A long tail trailed from his spine, covered in spikes. His mouth looked more like a contraption of gruesome death with dozens of jagged and dagger-like teeth. With thunderous flaps of his wings, the great bat descended upon Trost and landed like a mass of darkness upon the land. That thing is nearly twice as big as Eren, Historia said in alarm. He took down the colossal titan, right? Nanaba reminded with a raised eyebrow. While true, these creatures are of a higher order than the titans, Erwin said evenly as he watched the great bat stand tall and mighty on its 4 limbs, snarling at Eren. For now, we must trust in Eren and see how he fares, he added, glancing back up at the bats. If we join the fray, I have no doubt they will as well. We must use this time to our advantage. If Eren felt any fear or doubt, it was buried beneath wrath and hate as he glared down the massive foe. And he wasn't the only one. End of chapter. And there we have the second battle of Trost, with Kamisatz making his grand appearance to formally challenge Ghidorah for the title of Lord of the Storms. But not before he led his minions wreaking havoc for a little bit. Luckily they had time to prepare and had the other giants to help them. Next up, Eren versus Kamisatz. The great bat, the enemy of the sun, growled as he crept menacingly towards his foe. You have fallen far, one who is many. Eren narrowed his 6 eyes as he heard the great bat speak for the first time. It was a scratchy voice filled with mockery and loathing. He stood his ground, which only made the great bat let out something approaching a chuckle of derision. I have grown beyond you and your rule. while you have returned from death only as a hollow husk." The bat froze. His wings trembled. He took a step back, and then he glared. "You are too weak to even face me. You send forth this parasite to defend your throne over the storms." Eren's eyes dilated and his spines bristled at the insult of being called a parasite. "Pray this boy kills you, foolish upstart. I will not be so generous." It seemed Eren wasn't the only one getting pissed off. As the wind and rain billowed about them, with humans and monsters watching on, the two monsters starred one another. The thick tension was cut by a lightning strike. Dragon and bat both roared over the thunder as they charged one another. The bat was larger than Eren, it was without question. But Eren was not without his tricks. As the bat lunged at him with an open maw, Eren turned to the side and swung his tails into his foe's head. One of the spiked ends collided into the bat's face, making him roar in pain as his terrible visage was scarred and bloodied. The other tail missed, and in retaliation the bat bit at the tail below the spikes. Eren howled in pain as the bat tried to yank and drag him off his feet, but even the bat could not do that with ease. Instead he bit through the tail, taking it off. There was an instance of white-hot pain, and Eren saw a flash of some creature. No, various creatures all trying and failing to bite through these same golden sails. He pushed the mental image away as his necks began to glow and he could taste the lightning in his throat. The bat snarled before leaping to the air with flapping wings, barely avoiding Eren's breath attack. The bright, zigzagging beams impacted the wall of Trost, dust and smoke rising from it. Eren ended his attack as the bat circled above and around to dive at him. He couldn't dodge this attack, and letting this thing get claws on him seemed like a bad idea. So, he decided to try something potentially stupid. The bat blinked as, right as he was upon his enemy, Eren leaped up as much as he could. He latched onto one wing of the bat, mouths biting into the forearm with his teeth meeting armored flesh while his feet scratched into the membrane inside. But it was not enough, the pained bat slamming himself and Eren down with enough force to dislodge and stun the golden dragon. Before Eren could avoid it, the talons of the bat's feet had grabbed him and took to the air once more. Eren struggled as his enemy flew up, higher and higher above the walls. Eren's friends and allies could only watch on helplessly as the bat began to dive down and drop him like a bomb back into Trost. The impact reverberated through the city as Eren groaned. "Eren!" Mikasa yelled, body already tense to leap to his aid. "Don't!" Jean called out over the rain, looking back up at the swarm of smaller giant bats. "If we make a move they will too. We can't just do nothing." Mikasa called back with a glare. "We're not." Armin called up, looking north along the walls. Mikasa followed his gaze and saw soldiers running down the wall, each with a pack strapped to their back. "You're part of the reason, Walk, right?" one of the soldiers said as he stopped at them, turning his back to him. "Here, each of you take some acoustic rounds for your flare guns." "Acoustic?" Jean murmured skeptically, taking some nonetheless. "I know we all talked about this idea, but it still seems kind of crazy." "We saw it work," Armin reminded. "You might have, I was too busy trying not to get eaten," Jean said with a snort. "Thank you," Mikasa said to the soldier. "I'm guessing the plan is to sit tight while these are all passed out." "Yeah, that's about the long and short of it," the scout said, his expression grim as he looked down at the battle. The bat flew above Eren, eyeing the body and knowing that would not be enough to slay the three-headed beast. "Surrender, parasite, and I will allow you to live as my servant." Eren barely heard the insulting offer as he began to get back up. This body was weaker than it should be. No, that wasn't right. It was getting stronger, bigger, just more in every way. He slowly looked up just in time to see the bat swoop down and strike his claws into his body, drawing black blood. Eren growled, but even the pain felt distant to him. He merely gazed up at the bat. No, not the bat, but the bat's wings. He recalled a memory that wasn't his own, of flying through the skies of worlds he had never seen. His eyes drifted to the side, to the wall of Trost where his lightning had struck. He could faintly see the massive leg of a wall titan, exposed for the first time in a century. "Eren." He blinked at the voice. It felt like time had slowed or even stopped. He could barely feel the rain or the wind. He slowly turned around to where he heard the voice and he wasn't in Trost anymore. He was in that desert again, the stars glowing brightly above him. The great glowing tree was before him, an entity he both dwarfed and was dwarfed by. And at the base of the tree was a woman, Frida. The queen of the walls smiled up at him, her expression worn and tired, apologetic and knowing. "You know what you have to do." Thunder rumbled behind him impatiently. All at once, Eren recalled a great many things. And these memories were his own. Every time he fought a Titan shifter and his neck started glowing. Every time a Titan couldn't heal from his attacks. Every time he made a Titan feel pain. Every time he killed a Titan. Frida's scars. But he only had 2 heads. Didn't you only have 2 heads before? Did he get bigger? Parasite. A maggots? The voice echoed loudly in his ears, no, his very mind. Everything began to click into place. Just like that, he was back in Trost with the wind and rain about him, and the great bat looming in the sky. And where Frida once stood in his vision, another figure now stood in the streets of Trost. That guard of hers, the man called Kenny, and he was pulling something behind him. Hey brat, he greeted casually, not even bothering to raise his voice. Frida said you might need this. With that, he tossed his luggage in front of him towards Eren. It was a person. Berthold. The holder of the colossal Titan was without hand or feet, and he was groaning with a dazed and drugged look about him. He was unaware of where he was or what was going on. Eren knew what had to do. Do you surrender, fallen king? Eren ignored the bat, his focus solely and utterly on the traitor before him. A man he had called a friend and trusted comrade, who had been responsible for this hell they had all endured for years, who served those that hated their shared people. Eren felt his hate growing. What's he doing? Historia asked with a frown. There's someone down there, Nanaba said, handing Erwin a spyglass. The commander scowled as he saw who she meant. Bertolt Hoover. What? Me, she said in surprise. How did he get free? I don't believe he did, Erwin said simply. Before anyone could question or speculate, Eren suddenly lounged down and snatched the shifter into his mouth. What the hell is he doing? Connie called out in surprise. I get being hungry, but still. A final meal, you foolish? The bat stopped his mockery as he saw the glow emitting from his foe, lightning beginning to dance across Eren's many scales. What? No, Eren. Eren, don't. Please don't. Berthold screamed from within Eren's mouth as his awareness returned at the worst possible time. Someone save Dash. His pleading fell on deaf ears as lightning suddenly burst out from Eren in all directions. Buildings, pavement, the walls, the hellspawn bats, and a few soldiers were hit by the many beams. Even the great bat himself found himself struck by the terrible storm of power, making him land with a pained screech. For a moment it was silent. Even the heavens had gone quiet, the wind and rain dying as a heavy atmosphere covered the area. Smoke obscured Eren's form as enemies and allies squinted their eyes for him, but all they could spy were stray beams of lightning within the cloud. And then Eren let loose a great and triumphant roar with his 3 heads. A great gust of wind dispersed the smoke, and all beheld what had happened. Eren's tail had regenerated and all his wounds healed. He might have even gained a few more meters in height. But all anyone truly noticed was his new limbs. From each of his sides were now 2 massive wings. Oh, just when I was getting used to how amazing he looks, Hang swooned as she marveled at the transformation. Those beauties have to be over 20 meters long each. He has wings now? Ymir couldn't help but exclaim. Question is, can he actually fly? Nanaba said with a frown. Erwin, however, was noticing something else. Their enemies. Be it the swarm of hellspawn bats or the enemy of the sun himself, all of the invading monsters seemed to grow fearful at the mere sight of Eren now. With feet and wings, Eren stalked forth toward his foe with renewed fury and focus. It felt so much better, more natural than always balancing on just 2 limbs. For the great bat, desperation eventually overshadowed fear and he took to the air. Eren merely glared up at his cowardly enemy. With a great flap of his wings, his feet began to leave the earth. His focus was singular and fixated as he flew up to reach the great bat, who snarled and steeled his resolve before charging at Eren as well. They locked in midair, their heads and legs attacking one another as they spun and tried to remain airborne. Where once the bat's attacks drew blood with relative ease, now his claws and fangs found much greater resistance against the armor that was Eren's golden scales. My God, Rico whispered in terrified awe as they watched the 2 giants fight. It was like watching 2 gods, 2 forces of nature clash in the sky. The great bat tried to tear Zwei's throat out, but his efforts were rewarded with the fangs of Ainz latching onto his head, the teeth hitting bone. With all his effort, the bat managed to struggle free with a bleeding head and tried to make some distance between himself and the Golden Demise. He roared out to his swarm, his army, his minions. Kill him. All of you. Eren narrowed his 6 eyes and looked sharply around for any attacks. Not one of the lesser bats moved from where they hovered. The great bat looked around and realized that he was no longer the clear victor in this contest. He looked forward again and found Eren already swooping upon him. He dodged, flying under Eren, and barely missed being hit by the tails. "You may have wings, but you are inexperienced, parasite." Eren glared but didn't deny the claim. He wasn't sure if it was the foreign memories that allowed him to fly this well, but it only went so far without getting used to it. He stopped as he felt something. Something deeper than a memory. An instinct. He beat his wings and began to ascend higher. Where is he going? Armin murmured to himself as he watched his friend fly towards the clouds. Eren, Mikasa whispered softly. No, no, and no. The enemy of the sun screeched in defiance but also terror as he flew after Eren in a mad dash. He was gaining on the dragon quickly, desperate to reach him, to stop him. Oh no, you don't. Boris yelled out as he flew up in the air. Despite his injured wing, he could still fly. You idiot, don't? Grice called up in alarm. Boris ignored his friend and pushed himself as hard as he could to try and reach the greater monster. He didn't need to defeat this bat, just slow it down for Eren to finish this. He ignored how his own inner beast was screaming at him to stop, to stay away from this dark king of the night. Maybe it was stupid. Maybe Eren didn't need the help. He didn't know anymore. All he knew was that he was the only one who could fly, who could help. The great bat noticed his approach. There was a snarl. Boris didn't really see what happened, just that he was suddenly falling. And his blood was filling the air. Boris? Eren. Just short of reaching the clouds, Eren had turned around to see Boris being struck down. The bat turned upwards again to go after Eren. But it was already too late. Eren opened his mouth. His body glowed. Lightning crackled through the clouds, the bolts converging towards him. No, he realized subconsciously they were converging on him. Striking him. He felt no pain, just a rush of intense power and might. He sensed the dread and defeat in his enemy's eye. He saw him attempt to reverse course and flee. With a terrible roar and a mighty flap of his wings, Eren let loose lightning not just from his maws but from every point of his body. The attacks rained down and tore through the body of the great bat, each strike scorching and tormenting the dark beast. With holes torn in his wings and his body too in pain to stay aloft, the enemy of the sun fell like a smoking comet. All watched his descent with awe and trepidation as he landed in the field outside Trost. Fly higher. Shut up, Eren. Now. I said shut up, Eren. He ignored the growling in his mind as he quickly swooped down to where Boris had fallen. The serpent laid upon a set of abandoned buildings he had crashed upon, just outside the sealed gate of Trost. Boris? Don't you dare die on us. How bad is it? Svi. Boris chuckled weakly, green blood dripping from his mouth. I guesses I never will get used to that. He jested with a cough. It's just a good thing you have wingsis now. Don't talk like that. Ainz growled frustrated while Svi remained solemn. Hey kid? Look after Ellie for me. Someone has to have her back when Grix gets too worked up, Boris requested. We will. Svi. The other two heads looked at him in frustration at his willingness to seemingly give up and accept this. Svi said nothing more as Boris grew quiet and still. Boris, Grice whispered, hoping that his friend was not dead. But this world had little room for hope. Grice? What's going on? Is Boris okay? Ellie called up in a concerned whimper. Grice didn't have the heart to answer her yet. Eren looked at the fallen comrade as helpless rage filled him. A scratching sound reached his ears. He suddenly had a target for that rage. His head turned sharply and looked out towards where the great bat had crashed. The beast was still alive, trying to crawl away unnoticed. Eren stalked forth with hate boiling through his blood. The bleeding, wounded giant futility tried to leap up and fly away, only to come crashing down again. The great bat tried ever harder to claw his way to safety as he felt the golden death coming to loom over him. With no other choice, the enemy of the sun stopped and bowed his head to grovel. Almighty One who is many, please? Mercy. Call off your parasite and let me live. Eren snarled as he used one clawed wing to flip Bat over onto his back, all three heads snarling at him. One Ainz. Svi. Not Dre. A parasite. Eren. With ruthless savagery, Eren began to tear the great bat apart at the chest, tearing chunks of flesh away and breaking bones. Eventually Eren's three heads latch onto the neck and torso. Lightning charged in his throat. And with a final blast, he ended the reign of the would-be Lord of the Storms. With blood still dripping from his mouths, Eren breathed deeply as he stood over the corpse of his foe while the wind and rain washed over him. Whoa, Sasha said uneasily as she and many others watched on from atop the walls. Makes you glad he's on our side. Rico frowned to herself from nearby. For now. The question is, what about the rest of them? Jean murmured as he and many others watched the skies cautiously for any attack from the lesser bats above, holding their acoustic flares at the ready. After a moment, the entire swarm moved as one and flew towards Eren. A suicide charge? To avenge their leader? Hang speculated as she cupped her chin. I don't believe so, Erwin said with a narrowed gaze. Eren slowly turned to see the horde of smaller enemies flying towards him. He narrowed his eyes, ready for another battle, but instead they all landed on the ground in front of Eren, half encircling him as he eyed them all suspiciously. They studied his glaring expression for a long moment, and then they bowed. To the shock of all that bore witness, the swarm lowered their heads to the Golden Demise. It was like an army kneeling to a leader, kneeling to their new king. End of chapter. And there we go, Eren defeated Kamisats and gained his wings. But it seems we might sadly lose Boris the Warbat. And yeah, Eren had a minor version of the King of the Monsters, ending with the lesser bats all bowing to him. Hope you all enjoyed the fight. And yes, chapter repeated something that I've said many times, Eren doesn't have all of Ghidorah's powers yet, he's growing into them. And as seen, the power of the Titans plays a part in that. Hail! 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 That was the chanting that rang in Eren's ears as the swarm of giant bats stood before him. So, does this mean they're staying here too? Connie asked uneasily. I don't know if I trust them not to eat us even with Eren around, Sasha said with a similar expression. While the humans bore witness to the display of submission, Eren had his gaze upon the bats. Even with their heads bowed, they were watching him, waiting for any sign. He could smell the fear on them. As if he would kill them anyway. It was tempting truly, but that could be such a waste. Thunder rumbled above, drawing Eren's eyes upward as the clouds churned above him. They almost felt inviting. You are too late. Eren stiffened as he felt the ire of the voice of the storm. She will not allow us to fully claim my throne today. Eren. As if in answer to his question, a great light and a melodic roar rang out from the heavens, the thick clouds pushed away by a great light breaking through the darkness. Look who showed up, Grice muttered as many squinted to see the figure descending. Is that Mothra? Hang said, awe shining in her eyes as she beheld the angelic insect. For once it was not just her. Many were staring in disbelief as the giant moth descended like a graceful queen from the heavens. She's beautiful, Sasha couldn't help but say, Connie nodding in dumbfounded agreement. The bats screeched as the rays of both the sun and Mothra's light came down upon them. They flew away and scattered to find refuge in the darkness where they could find it. It would not be a lie to say that even Eren himself was in awe of the Queen of the Heavens, but more than that, he felt the contempt of the storm. And with those emotions came flashes of memories of this figure in a younger Earth opposing the storm. In a time when she heralded a mountain rising from the sea with blue fire upon its back. She landed before him, and he could see how small her own body was compared to his. He was pretty sure he could kill her. He just didn't know if he had a reason to. You have done well, Eren Yeager, Mothra greeted with a soothing and regal politeness. All six of his eyes narrowed. You know our name? Dre. How? Mothra slowly held up two of her front limbs, and Eren felt it was a gesture of peace from her. I watch over all of the ancients, both those that remain. She paused, looking down at the corpse of the giant bat. And those that have returned, she added, looking intently at Eren now. Or rather, through him. It has been many ages, conqueror from the stars. Not nearly long enough, wretched fly. She could hear the voice. Strange. Grice and the others could sense the storm's attention was on them, but could the storm speak to them directly? The storm wasn't exactly talkative. The question remained, though, how could the great bat and this Mothra hear what should only exist in his mind? Mothra's attention returned to Eren himself, drawing him out of his thoughts. Be wary of him, brave hunter. You have no idea what he might unleash. Eren narrowed his eyes. Why did the storm feel amused by her words? Before Eren could question anything, Mothra flapped her massive wings and took to the skies once more as she flew high and away. Once more she just fucks off and leaves us confused as hell, Levi remarked to himself. Yes, she did, Erwin remarked suspiciously. Seeing that the fighting was finished, he decided to get everyone back on task. Everyone. The battle is over. Search for any wounded and gather the dead. With that, the walls were abuzz with activity, and Grice took this time to slide down the exterior of the wall. Poor Grice, Hang said softly as she looked over the side. He must be going to say his last goodbyes. Grice did not speak as he walked over to the corpse of his fallen comrade, the green blood pouring through the ruins and soil he lay upon. They had survived a great deal together. Their lives under Marley's boots, the torture after they were captured, their inner beasts trying to overcome them as they adapted to these new forms. They lost so many along the way, but at last things had started looking up. But this cruel world had a terrible way of humbling the hopeful, of reminding them why they should not be too optimistic. Because no matter whose side was winning, there were always losses in a battle. And now he had lost another of his friends. "I'm sorry, Eren." Grice looked up at Eren, his great wings making him look all the more massive now. And yet, despite his victory, the three heads all looked saddened. Angry, resigned, and grieving was how he would describe each head. But the sadness in their eyes showed through regardless. "He died because of me. If I had acted sooner, Eren." Grice silenced Eren by spinning to tail whip him in the face. All three faces, actually. "Oh," Sasha exclaimed. Should we do something?" "Like what?" Connie asked in bewilderment. "Don't get worried unless one of them starts bleeding," Jean recommended with a scowl. Eren just blinked and his heads glanced at one another, stunned by what just happened. Did you just? Eren. Smacked you with my tail?" "Yes, I did," Grice said flatly before sighing heavily. "Don't talk like that, Eren. Boris did it to try to help you. If I had wings I would have too. But he didn't need to die. I could have." "Eren. What? Handle it yourself?" Grice asked with a headshake. "Maybe you could have, but he didn't know that. None of us did, really. That's what comrades do. If they think one of their own needs help, they help. And yeah, sometimes we get killed trying to do just that." Grice paused to look back at Boris, a sad rumble in his throat. "Bastard looks damn peaceful," Grice finished off. "I'm sure his only regret was that he'd never get to fly circles around your golden ass. You still have to get the hang of those wings." Dre softly chuckled as Ainz grew silent and Zwei stared at Boris's body. No matter how powerful they became, they could never save everyone. "I won't let his death be for nothing. Zwei, you live." "That already means it wasn't for nothing," Grice said simply. "Eren? Do me a favor, let Ellie out here?" Eren looked to the sealed breach for a second before nodding. He turned away as he flapped his wings to take off and fly a small distance away, testing his new limbs as he turned to fly towards Trost. It was different, using them intentionally as opposed to how instinctual it had been during the battle. "Brace yourselves," Rico called out as Eren flew overhead. The wind generated from his passing was strong enough that many barely stayed on their feet, and a few fell off the wall. Mercifully, they all managed to save themselves with their ODM gear before they fell to their deaths. Most, however, were just thankful that Eren's tails remained well above the walls. "We need to warn the brat about doing that," Levi remarked, watching as a box crate fell off the side of the wall and tumbled down below. "If he were flying any faster or lower, that might have been bad." "That can wait for a few minutes," Erwin instructed, having braced himself well enough. He too looked down as Eren landed near the breach below to approach Ellie. "For now, allow him to help a comrade mourn." Levi nodded in understanding before looking down at the blood on him and his weapons. "Disgusting." The wart dog watched as the golden dragon approached her with apologetic eyes. "He's dead, isn't he?" Ellie asked in dread and resignation. Eren froze. Dre answered. "I'm so sorry. I'm here to let you out." Ellie whined sadly and nodded. Eren approached the boulder but stopped. For a moment he just stared at it, having almost tried to move it with his heads again. He held up the end of his wings. They weren't hands and arms, but they were better than nothing. It took some awkward movements and arrangements of his new limbs, but he was soon able to push the rock aside with some effort. "Take all the time you need, Eren." Ellie nodded in thanks as she walked outside. It didn't take her long to spot Grice and with him Boris's body. Eren tipped his head as he soon heard a sorrowful howl from Ellie echoing over the lands. "You grieve for a weakling." "Shut up, Eren." Eren tried not to snarl at what he felt to be a mocking silence. "Eren." He snapped out of his inner turmoil as Mikasa landed on Ainz's head. The most wrathful head calmed as she reached down to touch his golden scales. "Are you all right?" she asked in concern. He wasn't. She knew that, but sometimes it must be asked all the same. When Dre lowered his head, Mikasa spoke again. "It's not your fault." "Wasn't it though?" The great bat and his swarm had come for him to challenge the voice of the storm. If he had left and faced them alone, maybe he could have saved not only Boris but everyone else who died today. No, he would have been killed if he hadn't devoured Bertolt and gained these wings. Maybe if he had figured this all out sooner? He stumbled forward suddenly. Eren? Mikasa called out in surprise. Eren didn't answer. It only now sunk in that he had eaten Bertolt. He hated him. He had pretended to be their friend when he was the enemy. He was the one who kicked in the gates of Shiganshina. He had done the same here at Trost. He tried to kill all of them when they were discovered. He was the reason his mother was eaten. But he had devoured him just like a titan would have. Everything was starting to spin a bit, and having 3 heads made that worse. His limbs were feeling sluggish and heavy as he struggled to keep his eyes open. What's gotten into him? Levi muttered as he saw Eren stumbling about. Mikasa leaped off Ainz's head and landed on the wall, while Eren's golden form suddenly fell over with a great thud. Eren! Mikasa called out in alarm as she quickly landed nearby and ran up to one of his heads. Mikasa, what happened? Historia called out as she descended with Ymir and Hang right behind her. I don't know, he just collapsed. Mikasa said in worry. Maybe he's just exhausted? Ymir suggested with a raised eyebrow, glancing at the draconic giant. I mean, he did just sprout whole damn wings. He was probably just running on adrenaline, Hang concurred, watching Eren carefully. He's still breathing, so dash. Hang stopped as one of Eren's eyes opened. But it wasn't Eren's emerald eyes. It was a hellish, blazing orange and red orb. Fuck, Ymir cursed under her breath as they all tensed. Maggot princess. Historia inhaled sharply, knowing it was addressing her somehow. Historia? Talk to us. What is he saying? Ymir asked tensely. Ymir froze as the eye shifted to her, the pupil dilating with vile intent. She didn't need translation to know this thing wanted to kill her right here and now. Every instinct in her body told her to transform, to grab Historia, and run to the ends of the earth. Then to keep running even then. So you're Eren's beast, Hang said with a neutral look as she leaned forward and tried to get his attention. She received it. The eye was still murderous but at the same time almost disinterested. Hang just smiled. A shame that you're such a grouch. I can only imagine the stories you could share with us, one who is many. The disinterest turned to interest if only for a second. But Hang didn't have a chance to prod further. Mikasa stepped forward. The eye landed on her. Mikasa glared back. I don't know what you are. I don't really care. But give Eren back, Mikasa ordered coldly. The hateful eye held her gaze for a moment longer. Then it faded back to green just before the eye closed. Historia? Ymir prompted. He called me a maggot princess. Historia answered awkwardly. That's it? Hang asked in surprise, looking from the blonde to the golden-scaled beast. What a rude fellow. Don't make it sound like a random person you met in a bar, Ymir said with a shiver. I thought I was going to shit myself there for a moment. Only thought. Historia asked meaningfully. I might have. Hang hummed as she looked over at Mikasa, who was still staring at Eren's heads. You should be careful when that happens. Eren might not be able to take back control fast enough. Mikasa nodded mutely, and Hang wasn't sure the girl was truly listening to her. Well, she had a lot to report and study after all this. Hang sighed loudly and said to herself, I might have to get Grice to help collect the dead bats if Eren doesn't wake up soon. Meanwhile, Eren was not surprised that when he rose, he was once more in that realm of sand, with a night sky and a tree made of light. But he could see that the night sky was littered with dark clouds now. Eren numbly looked towards the tree. And at its feet he saw someone. At first he expected it to be Frida. But it wasn't. It was a blonde child? Or a woman? Eren wasn't sure as he narrowed his 6 eyes on her. Or was it 2 eyes now? Just as he felt like he was somehow both taller and smaller than the mighty tree, he now had this strange sensation of both staring down at this girl but also being almost eye to eye with her. Who are you? He called to her. She didn't say anything. She just kept walking through the desert sands to move past Eren. It seemed to take her hours to move an inch and yet seconds to cross a mile. Eren turned to watch her until she stopped at a sand dune with a large stone sticking out of it. Wait, stone? Eren narrowed his eyes, very sure that this hadn't been there before. Truly, across the massive expanse of sand, he could see nothing else besides the tree. Acting more on instinct than anything, he reached out and with a single flap of his wings or swing of his arms, sent a gust that blew away the dunes like a sandstorm. As the dust cleared, Eren inhaled sharply at what he saw. The stone had been a horn. The horn of a bat. The great bat, the enemy of the sun, the would-be lord of storms. His face was twisted into pain and terror. His still form was half sunken into the dunes of sand. No, that wasn't right. The bat's massive body was dissolving into the sands themselves, crumbling away like a long, withered statue against the passage of countless years. Thunder rumbled in the sky above. "Pray this boy kills you, foolish upstart. I will not be so generous." Eren frowned as he remembered the warning the one who as many had given the great bat. It seemed he had delivered on it all the same. He turned his attention down once more and saw that the girl was looking up at him. She had such a haunted and exhausted look about her, her form withered and her clothes. Looking closely, he realized she was bleeding, slow and steady. From where he couldn't tell, but it seemed like it was everywhere. "Who are you?" he asked again. Once more, the thunder rumbled and a memory answered him. "Queen of Maggots?" What? But that was what the voice called Frida. Why would... He blinked and saw the girl reaching to touch his leg. The instant she did, a spark rushed through him. He saw her bleeding and wounded, missing an eye with an arrow in her back. He could hear men and dogs. The girl wandered towards a tree, a massive one with an opening in it. She fell down, sliding into someplace dark and wet. She couldn't swim. And then, in the darkness, a light. A strange creature that swam through the darkness and came to the girl. Its many tendrils moved to embrace her, to become one with her. And then, with a flash like lightning, she arose as the first Titan. Ymir Fritz. Eren didn't even realize he had spoken as her name leapt to his mind. He looked down and saw that she was gone. He turned back to look at the tree again with a frown. Eren didn't understand, not really. But he had figured something out during that battle just before he ate Bertolt. "That's why you call us maggots," Eren said grimly to the clouds in the heavens. "The Titans come from you somehow, don't they?" The tree, which was never truly a tree at all, pulsed with a terrible golden light at its center. The wind took a sharp, wrathful turn and Eren could hear a voice. "I'll kill them all." It sounded like his own, but all of them. He knew now it wasn't just his. Every one. End of chapter. Well, there you have that. The bats hailed Eren as their new alpha, but Mothra kinda scarred them off for now. Now to mourn the dead, including Boris. And yes, a skullcrawler just tail-smacked Ghidorah. Only in this FIC does that not end in death. But yeah, Eren paced it out, and while He get a little trip into the pats, Ghidorah had a peek at some of Eren's friends. But yeah, Eren has realized something that was probably obvious for readers. There is a connection between Ghidorah and the Titans, and the Restorationists turning into giants. Hope you all enjoyed this bit. What happened to the storm? Annie sat on the edge and glanced back at Reiner, approaching the massive hole in the building they were camping in. The rotting building was damp from the heavy rain that had pummeled them. Don't know. There was a change in the wind, and suddenly it went away. Reiner looked up and frowned, seeing the clear sky in the far distance approach them as the clouds continued to blow away. That wind looks like it's blowing from Trost. What, think Eren found a way to control the weather now? Annie asked with a grim frown. Reiner grimaced. With the way things have gone, I don't know if we can rule anything out, no matter how insane it sounds. Annie hummed. There's no way we're saving Bertolt. Reiner scowled. You think they've already had him eaten? If not by a pure Titan, then Eren definitely. He either has or he will. If he has his way, all three of us will never leave this island alive, Annie said with a simple finality. I still have no idea what he is, what he's become, Reiner said with a frown. He's an island devil, right? Annie remarked dryly. Reiner gave her a dark look. You have something to say, Annie? Annie just kept her gaze on the horizon. Eren was always either going to die in his first battle or become a bane to us. You were just stupid enough to get close to him, even help him. What did you think would happen when he found out we're the reason this all happened? Reiner gritted his teeth, ready to snap. And then, suddenly, the world disappeared around them. The high view they had from Wall Maria was replaced by a sandy landscape under a starry sky dotted with dark clouds. And in the distance, they could see a strange entity of pure light, shaped like a tree. Annie bolted to her feet instantly. The fuck? She whispered, a bead of sweat running down her head. What is this? Where are we? Reiner asked in alarm, the air feeling strange around him. Did you hear that? Annie asked with a furrowed brow. Reiner? Annie? That's Bertolt. Reiner realized, looking towards the tree of light. It's coming from over there. Wait, Reiner, don't. Annie called after as the armored Titan began to run towards the voice. Damn it. They kept running, but no matter how far or fast they journeyed, it felt like they never got any closer. What? No. And yet, Bertholt's screams only seemed to get louder and clearer. Bertolt. It's me. Where are you? Reiner yelled out, looking across the sands for any sign of their friend and comrade. It sounds like he's right in front of us, Annie said to herself, unnerved by whatever this was. Eren. Eren, don't. Please don't. Bertholdt's cries began to turn shrill and hysterical. Bertholdt. We're here. Just show us where you dash. Reiner stopped as he came to the edge of a steep dune. There, at the base of the slope, was Bertholdt. He was half buried in the sand, weakly and desperately reaching out while facing away from them. There he is, but where's Eren? Annie said in alarm. Worry about that later, Reiner said as he ran down the dune. Annie opened her mouth, but froze as she saw the sand shifting under her feet. Reiner. Stop. But he didn't listen, running towards Bertholdt so fast that he might trip if he was unlucky. He ignored the sand rolling down around him. He ignored the rumble below his feet. He ignored everything in the frantic hope he might reach Bertholdt in time. But it was for naught. Before Reiner could get there, something burst out of the sand from under Bertholdt, knocking Reiner back. And as he saw a flashing of gold through the sands, he knew it was exactly who and what he expected. Eren. Reiner gasped out in horror and frustration as he stared up at the figure rising from the desert, with Bertholdt held in one of his mouths. Shit, Annie whispered as she ran down the dune as well. Not to join Reiner, but to avoid Eren's other head rising from under the massive dune. Through the dust and wind, they saw him looming over them in all his terrible might. Bertholdt painfully reached out from where he was held, between the teeth of the middle hand. Reiner, Annie? Bertholdt gasped out, his hand bloody and shaking. Bertholdt. Reiner yelled as he bit his hand, and Annie scratched herself on her ring. Only for them to both freeze as absolutely nothing happened. What? Reiner said numbly. The great golden giant stared down at them with some vile and twisted form of amusement in the face of their helplessness. Without warning or mercy, Eren tossed Bertholdt up into the air, who screamed in terror. Wait, don't! Reiner screamed out. Eren. Kill me. Spare Bertholdt, take me instead. But Eren paid him no heed as Bertholdt fell back towards his awaiting jaw. Someone save Dash. Bertholdt cried out hysterically, only for the mouth to clamp around him again, the shifter fully within the maw now. Annie and Reiner could only stare in helpless horror as light glowed in the neck of the middle head. Bertholdt let out one last scream of agony as lightning flashed within Eren's mouth. With that one, all three heads looked down at the two remaining traitors. Frozen with fear, knowing there was nothing they could do, Reiner and Annie could only watch in horror as Eren's eyes flashed from the intense emerald to hellish orange. And never once did his hateful visage waver. They could feel and smell his breath on them. Truly, it was as if death itself was clawing at their very bones. And then, it was gone. They now stood at the top of the wall, frozen in dread and incomprehension. What the fuck just happened? Annie whispered as she looked down at her trembling hand. She cut a finger on her blade just to check, just to know. She calmed as she saw the small wound heal. How did we get up here? Reiner said nothing, mouth open in a silent gasp. He put his hands on his knees as he struggled to remain standing and not hurl his last meal over the edge. Was that real? Was Bertholdt really gone now? He didn't know, but every instinct told him, yes, there you two are. Numbly, slowly, they turned to see Paik, who was sitting on the wall with her head cocked. Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost, Paik remarked in concern. More like a devil, Reiner murmured as he clutched his head, tears forming out of the corner of his eyes. Bertholdt. Paik frowned. What happened? We don't know, Annie whispered, a hint of horror in her tone. We don't know. Paik looked between them. If it were one, she'd say they had a nightmare. But it was both, so it was more than that. Should I tell the war chief you need to speak to him? Yeah, that might be best, Reiner said numbly. Just take the long route to him? I can manage that, Paik assured as she began to crawl off. Meanwhile, Eren arose mere hours after he slept, without fanfare or much attention. He sat up and noticed that Trost was once more a scene of much activity. Wounded to be treated, corpses to deal with, and more. Many noticed him awaking and moving, but it was a testament to how little attention that warranted in itself. You're awake. Eren looked to the side at Grice, who was dragging the corpse of a bat around with his tail. Sorry, Eren. Eren, if anyone deserves to take a rest after that, it was you, Grice said without judgment, his own tone even and tired. You mind helping with these bat corpses? We're taking all of them outside except for a few that Hang is keeping to study. That sounded about right to Eren, nodding his three heads as he stood, finding his balance again. It was going to take time to adjust to having these wings that doubled as legs? Arms? He could walk with them was the point. Ellie? Eren. Grice sighed at Eren's concerned tone, glancing at the breach. She's still with Boris. Some are talking about giving him a funeral pyre. Others. Eren didn't need him to explain. He was sure even Hang was tempted to do some research on the dead corpse. Dare I ask how Hang marked the one she's keeping? Eren. Grice snorted. She's got one of her helpers at each. Their only order is to tell you to not pick those corpses up. Eren cocked his heads at that. He could only imagine how bored those souls were getting. Jaeger is awake, Rico mused absently, spotting the heads rising from where she stood entrost. Good. He should have an easier time dealing with these corpses than us, Mishi said with a slightly disgusted look. Rico nodded to the section commander. The scouts and the garrison had tried their hand at disposing of the oversized rodents, but most wagons could not support the weight. The only viable option had been a rather lengthy time chopping up one body and then making several trips outside the wall. It was a rather gruesome affair. That was the one good thing about Titans, they never left much mess. Only our own corpses to worry about. Mishi chuckled. You sound like Levi. He's made that remark more than once. Rico glanced up at him. Where is the famous captain? I haven't seen him since Jaeger passed out. The commander sent him back to Kralva. Partially to bring his team back, partially to see if anything else happened there, Mishi explained. That made sense to Rico. Just because they were attacked here doesn't mean they weren't attacked elsewhere. Flying monsters. Such a simple way to make the walls useless, she remarked with a hint of dread. Mishi hummed to himself. We knew that was a possibility since Boris showed up, he said, glancing at the small woman. Is there something you wanted to say? Rico was silent for a moment. She didn't expect him to read her so well. My old captain was killed during the first battle of Trost, back before we knew that Jaeger was one of us. Mishi tilted his head. You blame Eren for it? No, not at all, Rico said with a headshake. He didn't die to a Titan. His leg was cut off by a blade. Mishi blinked at that. Did he do that to himself? He asked. It wasn't uncommon for soldiers trying to cut off a limb to escape a Titan only to bleed out. Perhaps, but I have my doubts, Rico said with a headshake. His ODM gear was missing too. I suspect it was the traitors. Maybe he overheard them or something. I don't know. And maybe I'll never know, Rico said with a sigh. He wasn't the best captain or man, far from it. Still, it's a rather bitter pill to swallow that I might never be sure if he was killed by them or maybe he really just cut his own leg off and died while trying to stop the bleeding. Mishi sympathized with her. It was hard, the what-ifs and maybes that came with being the one who survived. Rico huffed in hollow amusement. It's funny. He was always paranoid, some might even say a coward. But he did ultimately make a gamble and believe that Jaeger was trying to help us, back when he first showed up as this giant lizard. I wonder what he would have thought of all these creatures fighting for and against us. He would have thought the whole thing insane. Yeah, well, at least you can say your captain wasn't wrong, Mishi said in consolidation. Rico almost smiled. I suppose you're right, she said before turning away. My apologies. Thank you for indulging me. It's no problem, Mishi assured. The day continued on with only minor excitement after that. It quickly became clear that Eren could no longer exit through the breach. Thankfully, his wings made such an issue redundant. What came after was the morbidly amusing moment where Eren tried an alternative method to moving the bats outside. The obvious method was, of course, just to grab them with his mouths and feet to carry them as he flew outside. But Eren had another idea. Holy shit. Connie yelled as he saw a blood-covered bat flying past the corner of his eyes. Oh. Armin looked back as he heard Connie's yell, along with more commotion. People were watching as the bodies of the bats went soaring over the wall. Is Eren? The golden giant was throwing the corpses over the wall. Damn, Hannes said as he stood on the wall. He had blocked off part of the wall with the help of Jean, Historia, Emer, and Marco. When little Historia told me Eren's plan, I honestly thought we'd just be giving the walls a bad paint job. I just thought you were drunk, old man, Jean said under his breath. Hannes laughed loudly. Yeah, this definitely seems like the kind of idea you get while down the bottle, he said even as another bat was tossed over the wall. Jean? Captain Hannes? Armin addressed as he ventured over. A great deal of the soldiers and Trost had paused in their activity to watch the spectacle. What is? Hey Armin, Hannes greeted in a wave. Enjoying the show? I was just wondering, why? Armin asked bluntly. The golden blockhead down there thought this might be better than him making people nearly fall off the wall with him flying back and forth, Jean explained bluntly, jabbing a thumb down at Eren. And he's not wrong? I mean, we're not bracing every few minutes as he flies. That makes sense even if it is strange to watch, Armin mused, the entire event feeling surreal as he saw the large beast corpses hurled through the air. That's the furthest one yet. Getting close to 50 meters. Emer, I really don't think we should be taking bets on this. Armin leaned over and squinted. Was that Emer and Marco? Yeah, Jean said warily. I think they're running some kind of betting ring on how far Eren can throw the bodies. Armin blinked. I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that. Probably for the best, Hannes said with a chuckle. So where's Mikasa? She's supposed to be resting and eating. Commander Erwin wanted her and some others fresh and ready if any of the bats returned, Armin remarked. Supposed to be, Jean repeated, glancing down below. Too late, Jean, Hannes said with a grin. Eren already used Historia to tell her to go off and rest. Is it at all weird, him being the responsible one between the two? Jean asked mildly. It's actually kind of normal, Armin said with a weak smile. Eren and Mikasa always worried more about each other than themselves. Don't sell yourself short, Armin. They worried about you too, Hannes assured, patting the young man on the shoulder. Meanwhile, so, you want to explain what that was about? Levi asked, letting his horse rest and graze near a tree. Not sure what you mean, Runt, Kenny said with a chuckle. You're the one who found me, Levi reminded evenly. We thought you took Bertholdt back to the capital, but you were keeping him nearby. To feed to Eren Yeager. Sounds like you don't need me to explain anything, Kenny mused, hands in his pockets as he walked around. The golden brat and the other giants spilled the beans, Levi said with narrowed eyes. These forms, these giant bodies of theirs? They come with not just memories but the minds of these creatures. Crazy, ain't it? Like undead gods clawing their way back to life through us mere mortals. Kenny asked rhetorically. You and the Queen knew all about this but never said a damn thing. Why? Levi asked with narrowed eyes. Kenny was silent for a moment. It's not you lot we're trying to be secretive about. It's him. You mean Eren? Levi guessed. No, Kenny said before turning around. And yes. Levi knew exactly what he meant. What is that thing? Kenny sighed. Trust me, Squirt. I still have a hard time grasping everything. But, that thing in the kid's head? That's bad news. The kind of bad news that people long ago were afraid to even mention long after he died. Levi furrowed his brow. Then you have some plan to kill the brat and this thing with him. Is that it? Kenny barked a laugh. No. Just the opposite, I'm afraid, he said with a bitter smirk. What are you getting at? Levi asked, his patience running thin. Kenny was for a moment. That thing abandoned Grisha Yeager for Eren. What makes you think killing him will kill this beastie for good? Levi blinked. You don't want to kill Eren. You want to use him like a living cage. Kenny smirked. Got it in one. According to Frida, this beast should be able to abandon Eren at any time. But he hasn't. Maybe out of pride, maybe he's just too invested this time to want to start over again. But if Eren dies, he'll just start over. And he'll probably have an easier time. But these shits are old, ancient. They're patient, which gives us time to figure something out. Levi repeated, getting a curious look. You keep calling this thing, this one who is many, as a he instead of an it. Kenny smiled ruefully. Let's just say that after you've talked to one of these things enough, you have a hard time thinking of them as just things and beasts. Levi hummed but didn't press for more. We'll be in touch, and your commander will be brought more into the loop, along with some of your other scout friends, Kenny informed. Just be careful, Runt. These beasts may bleed and die, but they'll still make you relish the days when Titans were the worst you had to fight. Levi grunted as he watched Kenny mounting up his own horse. You know, you could have just told Erwin yourself instead of coming to me after I've already made it half a day after leaving Trost. Kenny grinned. I could have, but where's the fun in that? With that, he rode off, leaving a mildly annoyed Levi. End of chapter. Well, another post-battle chapter with Eren having an interesting way to clean up. Hurling the corpses of smaller monsters. That sounds like a sport the Kong race might have tried at some point. Anyway, not a lot else. Everyone has lots to share, and we got a bit more info from Kenny on Frida's goals regarding Ghidorah. Happy Halloween. So, what do we do with the bats? Just burn them too like Boris? Connie asked curiously as they stood in the field just outside of Trost. It was kind of surreal, so many of them standing outside Wall Rose like it was perfectly safe, despite the breach in Maria, which was still very much an issue. But with Eren and the others around, a few titans just didn't seem that threatening, especially since they would see any of them coming from miles away. We are not even sure if Boris's body will be easy to burn, Hang remarked, stroking her chin while staring at a few dead bats, all piled on each other thanks to Eren. These at least have fur and everything. But Boris has a house under him to set fire to, so that should help. This is somehow more morbid than when we were collecting the bodies to burn in Trost, Marco said softly. At least then we didn't have to talk about the best way to burn them. Connie blinked. Okay, it's kind of fucked up, but I have an idea. Yes? Hang asked, wondering what idea was rattling in this soldier's head. Well, Eren's lightning breath should probably get rid of most of it. I mean, I've seen how that rips through stuff. We had to cover up spots in the wall so the wall titans wouldn't wake up, Connie reminded. Marco rubbed his head. I haven't seen those and I don't really want to. Everything else, fine, but I really don't want to think about how the walls are made of colossal titans. Aang hummed. But Connie might be onto something. We'll try burning before asking. She trailed off with a frown. What did I do now? Connie asked expectantly. You don't feel that? Aang asked, her voice tense. Both soldiers blinked. What, you mean Eren and Grice moving around? Marco asked uncertainly. Aang narrowed her eyes. There was a sudden roar from Eren that caught everyone's attention. They looked over and saw him and Grice moving out rapidly. Everyone on the walls now. Ellie, guard the breach. Grice yelled out. Oh hell, what now? Connie cursed as they made it up the wall quickly. Among others, Hang stopped midway up and looked out to see what had their giants spooked. There was a small pack of wart dogs, the same creatures as Ellie's form. They were gathered to eat at the furthest corpses of the bats. You all heard Grice. Up top, don't hang where they can jump and snatch you. Hang called out as she realized the danger, heading up to the top as well. She took a breath as she landed. I knew those weren't Eren and Grice's footsteps. Marco looked at her strangely. You memorized what their footsteps sound like? And what they feel like? Yes, Hang answered casually as she looked out. Eren and Grice hadn't confronted the pack yet. The creatures were still eating, but they were eyeing the pair cautiously. She glanced around and realized Erwin wasn't here at the moment. Everyone, keep your eyes out, more of them might be in the area. Well, this might be one way to deal with the corpses, Ymir murmured to herself. Sasha looked at her curiously. What is it, potato girl? Ymir asked with a frown. Can you taste things in your Titan form? Sasha asked bluntly. You're asking that now of all times? Ymir asked in disbelief. What? You took a bite out of the bats and now those giant wolves are eating them, so I was curious. Sasha defended. Curious about what, how they taste. Newsflash, idiot, it'd be like eating a rat with wings. Ymir answered. And trust me, I know, I've eaten rats before. Everyone has eaten rats at least once since Maria fell, Sasha said with an eye roll. Speak for yourself, Jean muttered from a distance, not believing the conversation. What do you think? Should we drive them off? Eren. Grice watched warily as they stayed at a distance. They could deal with them pretty easily, but the question was, did they want to? Hard to say. If they were just dogs, I'd say we shouldn't let them get too comfortable. But after what you did with those bats. Eren's heads all growled and shared a few glances amongst himself. They had been thinking about it too, the swarm of bats bowing to him as their new leader. Could he make these ones listen to him too? Easily. Eren growled warily. He supposed he should be happy for the confirmation. We should at least speak to them. Swat. We'll get rid of them if we need to. You going to be alright with this, Grice? I mean, they were your comrades? Grice lowered his head slightly at the reminder. Yeah, I'll be fine. He doubted that Eren believed that. He wasn't sure he did himself. Without another word to each other, they began to approach the pack. The wart dogs soon abandoned their meal, spreading out in tense positions. Close enough to help each other, separated enough to avoid all of them getting hit by one attack. One of the dogs stepped forth, slightly bigger than the rest. We eat. We leave. No fight. Food plenty. Well, that was a good start. And Eren was very aware that this one was speaking directly to him now. You can stay and eat your fill for now, Eren granted, eyeing the creature and hoping it understood him. But you cannot hurt any people of the walls. The canine's head tilted. People? Walls? Eren grimaced. Right, they wouldn't get that. He looked back towards Wall Rose. You see those tiny beings up there? The wart dog did. Ah, humans. Tiny apes. Strange. One who is many never protects. The wart dog suddenly backed away in fear, as did the rest of the pack. Eren glared back at the storm before looking at the wart dogs. You may eat the bats, Dre, but you listen to me while here, Spot, or we'll tear you apart. Got it? Eren. He punctuated his warning with a snap of his tails. Yes, yes. We listen. We leave your humans be. Thank you, the wart dog leader said quickly. Eren nodded as he turned away, one of his heads keeping an eye on them at all times, but the hounds returned to eating rather quickly. It was only after a moment that he realized that Grice wasn't moving, watching the creatures eat. They returned his look sometimes, one even growled at him, but they were otherwise uninterested in him. Grice? You coming? Eren. Yeah, Grice said slowly as he turned to leave. Eren watched him with concern as they approached the wall. You alright? Eren. Grice nodded absently. I just didn't know they could be thankful, he said with a sigh. It's weird. My friends were in those bodies, now they're gone somehow. I wanted to hate these damn things, but I'm not even sure they have any idea what's going on either. Eren wasn't sure what to say to that. Luckily, he was saved from having to as a familiar figure landed on his center head. So, my handsome giants, how'd the diplomacy go? Hang asked with a smile. We told them they could eat the corpses and not to go after any people. But if the commander wants us to chase them off, though, we can, Grice explained. I'll pass that along, Hang remarked as she glanced at the pack. You think we can trust them? I think Eren scares them enough that we won't have to worry about that, but don't get too comfortable, Grice answered warily. Ainz and Dre nodded in agreement. Hang chuckled. Very well, we'll keep an eye out. But I'm going to assume the commander will want Trost closed up tonight. I don't think they could breach the other gate, but still. Better safe than sorry, it went unstated. Eren couldn't agree more. Meanwhile, as dusk began to settle on the horizon, Zeke found himself smoking a cigarette as he thought about what Annie and Reiner had told him. Bertholdt's death was not surprising in the grand scheme of things. The islanders would no doubt want that power for themselves, or that was his original conclusion. But what Annie and Reiner reported was alarming and baffling. The paths, that was what it had to be. But that would imply that Eren Yeager, his apparent half-brother, had the founder, which was strange. If he had Zeke's own Titan as well, the Beast Titan, he might just shrug it off as a strange Titan form. Even disregarding that, everything they had ever told him about this golden, three-headed monster sounded nothing like a Titan. Black blood, slower regeneration, and inability to change back, and even lightning breath? Still, all evidence pointed to Eren having the founder. If so, the need for royal blood was the only thing keeping the world from knowing the fury of the rumbling. From the fiery temperament Annie and Reiner had spoken of, Zeke had no doubt that Grisha had indoctrinated this new son to some extent. Did Eren know of the outside world already? Or had it been more subtle? Still, he felt like there was something more to this that he was ignorant of. Eren's draconic figure wasn't the only anomaly. He glanced off the balcony he stood on, seeing the distant hill of charred corpses of the massive hounds and the bipedal lizards who could imitate speech to trick them. They had been attacked by packs of these strange creatures, and they did not vanish when slain like a Titan. More than that, Eren had been accompanied not only by the crawler that had aided the people of the wall against the warriors, but also by a large serpentine flyer. Was it possible that Eren had a power similar to his own, to control these creatures? So how? Did Grisha somehow find another woman of royal blood to breed with? He had expected that to be common within the walls. But if he assumed that this golden form and these new monsters were truly not Titans, it was still definitely connected to them in some manner. It would make no sense for it not to be, given its ability to bring Annie and Reiner into the paths. What did you do, father? What have you unleashed on this already hellish world of ours? Zeke wondered to himself softly. He hadn't told any of the Marleyan officers about Reiner and Annie's experience. He doubted they would understand or trust something like visions from Eldians. After all, they were his handlers in all but name. He was in charge, but they would report all his actions upon returning to the mainland. Which was fine, he expected and planned for that. He had the trust of the higher-ups for his competence, if nothing else. They didn't want to cut his service any shorter than it was. Especially given his ability to transform and somewhat control Titans made with his own spinal fluid, and after he proved his loyalty by turning in his parents and the rest of the restorationists. Even if some of his own had called him names for that betrayal, like Dog of Marley. Zeke inhaled sharply, his cigarette falling from his mouth. Damn it, he muttered to him as he idly put the embers out with his shoe. He hadn't thought about those times in a long while. He tried not to. Dogs of Marley had been a common insult used by the Restorationists to call Eldians who became or strived to be honorary Marleyans. He had wondered why that had stuck out to him when Annie and Reiner mentioned the sapient crawler at Trost, beyond the obvious, of course. He looked back at the corpses of the dead wart dogs and crawlers, and suddenly felt something accusing in their dead visages. "I see my past has come to haunt me in more than one way," he muttered to himself. This was very bad for him. He couldn't breathe a word. If he was right and these creatures were the Restorationists, then it would not take long for someone to think that getting captured and sent to this island had been a plan of the Restorationists from the start, and throw accusations of him being part of that plan. It wouldn't matter that he had been a child. Logic meant little to most when it came to their hatred of Eldians and blaming them for anything wrong in the world, more so than rightfully deserved. But where had this power come from, these monstrous new forms? He needed more information. Zeke narrowed his eyes as he heard a strange flow to the wind. He looked to the horizon, towards the setting sun, as the last rays of the day began to vanish. As they did, he saw something in the sky. Are those bats? Meanwhile, burning Boris's body took more effort than expected, even with his increased size, but they eventually managed it. The Riesenwalk had all gathered near the large flame, along with several others that included Hang, Mishi, and Erwin. They had only known Boris a short time, but losing him had been a bitter pill. If Hang had to put it into words, she would say that Boris was the most relatable of the giants. Eren and Grice were often caught in thoughts of their rage towards their enemies, and Ellie was incredibly shy. But Boris, despite the language barrier, had been the most approachable in some ways, protective, casual, friendly. She looked over, seeing Historia sniff softly as she quietly cried, Emer putting a hand on her shoulder. Poor girl. Serving as the translator between them and the giants, she knew them just as people in giant, animalistic bodies. And despite the studious nature of the real Historia compared to the persona of Krista, it still hit her hard. Ellie and Grice stood close to the funeral pyre, watching their friend's body as it was burnt to ashes and a charred skeleton. Eren stood nearby as well, giving them the closest spaces as Boris's old comrades. Grice, Erwin spoke up suddenly, never looking away from the fires. Did you wish to say a few words? Ellie looked to the crawler, who looked down and thought. I wouldn't even know where to start. Mikasa was the one to break the silence next. What did Boris want to be when he was human? Grice paused, raising his head to the sky. He wanted to work with animals, he recalled with an empty laugh. Nothing special, I know. He was never sure really. Saving lives as a vet seemed nice, but he'd have to put some down too, put them out of their misery. Run a pet shop? He liked the idea, but he knew some would always end up with bad owners. I told him he should just work at a zoo. What's a zoo? Connie asked in confusion. Shush. Sasha said with a frown. He asked me that too, Grice said with a scuff. He didn't know what a zoo was either. We had never seen one. I had only heard about them from the nicer Marleyans who'd bothered to tell us stuff. The idea sounded amazing to him, caring for animals from all over the world. And despite everything, Boris was one of the kindest souls I ever met. But he was also strong. Strong enough to fight for his friends and people even if it hurts. Even if it was hard. Grice paused for a moment, his tail shifting about. I feel like I should pour a drink or something now, but I obviously can't, he continued with a hint of humor. I will never forget Boris, and I hope someday I'll see that this world has a place for us all, where someone like Boris is free just to be a kind, good friend. He looked up at the smoke rising into the sky and smiled. Rest easy, old friend, and fly wherever you please. You've earned it. A peaceful yet sorrowful silence came over them all as they silently paid their farewells to Boris. Eren dipped his head, trying to crush down the guilt he felt. Boris died trying to give him time. If he had been a bit faster, a bit stronger, maybe he'd still be here. The golden dragon was pulled from his thoughts as something in the night caught his eye. Eren growled warningly, getting everyone's attention as they saw where he was looking. At the edge of the flame's illumination was a wart dog that was cautiously trekking forward. Sir? Hang asked tensely. Hold. Everyone, Erwin commanded, narrowing his eyes at the creature. Grice coiled his limbs as the hound approached. Ellie swallowed and whined before speaking up. What do you want? She demanded, stepping towards the creature with all her courage. The wart dog stopped and stared at her before turning to the flames. Your pack mate? Ellie blinked, not expecting the question. She briefly glanced at Grice, but he had no advice for her. Yes, he was. The wart dog growled contemplatively, the flames flashing in the beast's eyes as if, Do you remember him? Ellie asked, almost scared of the answer in either case. The wart dog whined, placing a paw on its head. Small voice remembers. Small voice sad your packmate gone. The giants all shared a stunned look while Historia put a hand over her mouth to hide her gasp. The wart dog looked to Ellie again. We sorry you lost packmate. We? Ellie asked cautiously. The wart dog almost seemed to smile before raising his snout to the air and howling. Shit, did he just call in the others? Hannes muttered uneasily. But the owl was not a howl of hunting or intimidation. It was a howl of mourning. A howl that was shared as more distant members of this one's pack joined in, their calls echoing through the night. The howl ended, and the wart dog looked up at Eren meaningfully. We leave your land now. We leave your humans be. And just like that, he treaded off into the darkness before running to join back up with his own pack. What the fuck just happened? Jean asked eloquently. Historia, you mind explaining it? Grice requested numbly as he sat down and shook his head. I think I need a moment. Historia couldn't blame him, but as she looked up at the commander, she wasn't sure herself what to say. End of chapter. The corpses are mostly dealt with, and we gotta look into the warthogs that used to be Grice's comrades. Being social pack creatures, the wart dogs have a better coexistence with their human counterparts than most do, or at least potentially. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Support the writer. Don't forget to like, sub, share and donate for more videos.